Hello, everyone, and welcome to RHAP's coverage of Survivor 44. I'm one of your hosts, Shannon Guss, here to talk about another episode of the show with a lot of thoughts about it on Survivor Global with
me. It's Taran Armstrong here with the Survivor Stockwatch podcast. This is I've been trying to figure out what you call a thing that you do once per season. It's not seasonal. Our seasonal crossover. There you go.
Yeah. The double intro is hard. We haven't nailed it yet, I think.
Luckily, we're badasses.
I can be a badass.
How much of your soundboard is Jam Jam? Like
a decent amount
level.
At this point.
Yeah.
I want the gratification.
So good. I know. Yeah, you were really using that a lot last week. I noticed, and it's so great. Jam Jam is the highlight for me of a lot of things. And now that frankenship, I don't even want to say it. Now that frankenship is done, not in life. Everyone they're together. Love isn't dead. Everything's great. But now that frankenship in the game is over, Jam Jam and Carolyn and Franny's revenge arc, like that for me is like so much of my investment.
Can you explain frankenship to me?
Yes. As a ship name?
How do we get there from Franny and Matt?
Matt's last name is Blankenship.
Oh.
Yeah. If you remember on the draft, I kept two naming him. And I do. It's a great name. I always two name Matt Blankenship. Just immediately stumbled over it. And then, so Frankenship. And also it has ship in it.
I thought people were cheating by adding the ship. But then I was still confused about how they got Ken.
No, yeah, and it's great. My brother said this episode was Frankenship's monster, so I thought that was pretty good. That was a good one. So I'm glad to immediately credit him on that. And let's speak about it, Taran. How did you feel about this episode? How are we feeling? Good?
You know, if you've listened to my podcast over the season, you know that I've been down, especially over the last few episodes. My favorite episode was actually the one where nobody got voted out.
Yeah.
I think
only
because
half-decent episode of the season, yeah.
Yeah, because I felt like they actually explained what was happening because they didn't feel the need to like shock us with the vote out results. And so I felt like we actually understood the back and forth of what was happening between the people and their relationships. And since then, I feel like it's just kind of been like these last two episodes just not working for me, which is such a shame because the merge is usually the best time. You know, if I think about some of the best Survivor episodes, just the most reliable thing you can count on is usually the merge. People are coming together for the first time. They're meeting. We're getting to see new relationships form, new alliances. Anybody could go because nobody is safe. And I just don't really get that from these last two episodes. And by the time we do get a full-on vote, I feel like we're going to be we're what, like 6 days into this quote unquote merge where they're all on the same beach and they've already long developed these relationships. And I feel like I haven't seen them.
Yeah. I mean, I loved Rob framing it as like the swap, and that's a better way to look at it. But I do wonder if then we lost the momentum when we get to a true merge vote. I mean, they have all voted together in a constricted way last week. They've all been on the beach together. So do we lose that momentum? But I think it's always interesting when we come together to talk about US Survivor, because more than anyone, I feel like we are so used to so much content. I'm coming off the back of Australian Survivor. It's an extraordinary amount of content, maybe only eclipsed by something like Big Brother, hours and hours. And actually in this season, it wasn't even like time wasted. We got so much of like actual intricate strategy over 24 episodes, close to probably 30 hours. And then you have Big Brother. Obviously you get usually all the content. I know at the moment that might be a bit of a sore spot, but you still get a lot, hopefully more than 40 minutes a week. So I think that, when we come to 42 minutes, it's going to feel uncomfortable. We're going to feel like we don't understand as much, but I think we disagree based on listening to you with Asia last week on the issue there. Like for you, it kind of feels like that the story is not being told necessarily. And parts of that may be true. Although I think any inconsistency in the edit is giving us a lot of the star characters like Carolyn and Jam Jam. And I don't want to lose that because that's like getting me through, like give me that Jam Jam confessional. I'm like surviving on that at the moment. I think for me, that's not been it. I do think this is probably the most inconsistent edit since 41 for me without knowing the hard stats on it. But and the most players getting lost for sure. But in saying that, I think that where we lose them is the game mechanics. Like for me, like we haven't known a lot of Ratu as an example where they might sit, we're getting a lot of that in exits. Is that on edit? Or is that on the fact that the one vote they went to, no one really voted, you know, like no one showed their place and then they never went back to tribal council. Like for me, constricting game mechanics, and then it's probably not mutually exclusive, like the time needed to be spent on those mechanics is the issue. And that's the storytelling problem in game design and then time on it. So maybe we don't disagree that much, but yeah, that's where I think
I would clarify, I guess, that I've never been a huge stickler on like equality in the edit. I think
like
it's
Australian
a
Survivor then.
right. I think it's a huge bummer for players who get shafted in the edit, and I really feel for them. But I do understand the idea of like coming from a TV show perspective. Sometimes they just aren't super relevant to the overall storyline, and there are other flashier, more entertaining characters. I can understand that. I still personally feel like getting a good sense of where everyone is at can be more entertaining and can lead to more interesting episodes. But the main thing for me with the edit is that, you know, a tribe like Ratu, sure, they haven't gone to a vote, but, you know, I, having been a huge consumer of Big Brother live feeds, I know probably, you know, more than most, just how interesting people playing a game can be, even when they're not voting for people, even when they are just hanging out, repositioning over each other. In fact, those are some of the most interesting times to take a look at what they're doing, because when there's an actual impending vote, things tend to get kind of locked in place until the vote resolves. Whereas when things are kind of loose, they're kind of all over the place, and the relationships can shift and move, and it can be very, very interesting, very fun. And so I do agree, because I've seen a lot of people talk about like, you know, maybe the issue isn't the edit, maybe the issue is that there's just nothing to show because the game is so much faster with the shorter format. I do disagree with that notion. I'm sure it's more difficult for the editors because they're not used to it. But, you know, I've watched shows like Sequester, which takes place over 5 days. You know, I've watched things that are much shorter that have plenty of game drama, relationships, all being shown, happen really, really fast. This stuff is happening. It's just not really being shown to us. And that, I think that's, you know, we can get that from the exit interviews as well, as we're learning so much. I feel like I learn more about the actual game through the exit interviews than through the show, which is not how I've always felt with Survivor. And that's my main thing, because personally, I have trouble getting invested if I feel like I don't really understand what's going on. It kind of feels like a Brant Steele at times, where it's just like, then this is going to happen, and these people are going to go over here, and they're telling me that that's what's happening, but I'm not really following the through line of why, and like how we got here. And so that's my biggest issue, I think, so far this season, and, you know, to a degree, these last 4.
Yeah. And I think that's something we should talk about, because it becomes like, well, what we're saying is we're not finding the meaning. Like, why are these things happening? And is it because they're not showing it to us? Or is it because in many ways the game lacks that meaning, maybe due to speed, maybe due to trinkets overriding that social meaning, which is like something that we get value from. And even in like the big vote that was meant to happen at the beginning of this episode, it was going to be glorious. It sounded really interesting, but I had to laugh that it was still like, this person has an idol, this person has an extra vote. It's still a trinket based thing. And I think it's probably all of those things. And that's why we're going to talk about the mechanisms now. I think the issue is that there's less meaning when there's so much randomness thrown into the game. And I think it's what are the show's priorities. It's showing us more of that randomness, and that those two things aren't separated. You know, like the show's priorities, possibly in the storytelling and in the way they're creating the game, are the same thing. So you look at the fact that there's been this rumor, maybe the show will go to 90 minutes. And at first I was really excited about that, because I think there are elements of what the show does that could benefit from that, because they're already doing it well. You know, like great cast, let's see more of them, you know, or like fun little editing tricks that they've had, or like parts of new era editing that I've really enjoyed, maybe more in other seasons. I feel like we have not got enough of the cast in this season. Let's get more of that. But I also think that now I'm concerned, because like when I talk about like game decisions, sometimes I talk about like, if you're basing things on a bad read, it's like, you know, getting the wrong number at the beginning of Sudoku and thinking you're moving further, but actually every single number you put in is wrong. So you're actually walking backwards. You think you're making progress. And I think production is in a similar thing now, where 90 minutes might seem like strides, but if their read and intention on what they're doing is at least what I disagree with, and I want to qualify that because I have to come on and rant most weeks at this point, and I'm exhausted by it, but it's also the only way that I can like engage with the show. It's how I transparently feel. Yeah, if they're doing that, then what direction will they be walking in? Are they thinking extra time is more trinkets and more craziness? So I think it does come down to the core issue of what I'm going to talk about with this episode, which is production decisions. What are they doing? How did we get here? Like, how does Jeff sit and open a tribal council and say, well, you thought you were finally going to get some space and room to breathe and vote together, and then boom, a twist comes in. I'm like, Jeff, I agree with you, but why are you saying it like that? I think you meant it like, well, you finally thought you were going to breathe, get some room, and then a twist came in. Like, we're saying the same thing, but yours is in this like positive way. They just see the show very differently to the way I do. Not the way everyone does, but the way I think a lot of people agree. And I think that this episode, it wasn't the worst twist that we've had this season, and the bar for that is in the ground. But to me, it was my least favorite episode because it's too much. The tipping point is so far back. Like, the line is a dot to them. So to look now, and I think it was like we all thought maybe we'd finally get a vote, like a real vote with real numbers and space. And for that to be constricted down to its very core, and then more things to be thrown on top of that, and then other questionable production decisions. Like, if you take out each individual twist on their own, maybe they're all fine. Altogether, that's a lot. But altogether, on top of the fact that we can't get a normal vote, and we're going to get another likable person who goes for game mechanics and who it feels is just put into a situation that's then going to play out to what exactly production might want to happen. It's just not satisfying television for me. I don't think it's like, it's not that I don't think it's good Survivor. It's not good Survivor. But that, like, I think mediocre Survivor is great television. But this is not good TV. Like, I wanted to be watching Ted Lasso. I did follow up with Lego Masters as a palate cleanser, and it was delightful. So I shouldn't, like, I don't want it to be a chore. Like, it's work, but I don't want it to be a chore. I'm sure the rants will be passed out, but that's my basic feeling on it. It's just like, what are we doing every week? What is this frankenship's monster show? How do we get here? Why?
Yeah. I mean, I think that I think you're right that the editing is hand in hand with the way that they're structuring the game. I haven't listened to Jeff's podcast, but I've heard about it. And I've heard that he wants to stay a step ahead of the players, and he wants to, prevent pagongings and
what pagonging? Pagonging, there's nothing to pagong. You have to have a dynamic to break it. We can't even get to that point.
That's kind of my point, which is that, like, Jeff is kind of talking about like staying a step ahead and shaking things up. But the problem with shaking things up is that there's nothing to shake up. There's nothing has settled to shake up. I'm fine with shakeups. I think that Survivor has always been good at that in ways that Big Brother often fails. But if they merge, but not really, because there's a shakeup, then they are gonna have finally a merge with a vote, but not really because there's a shakeup. Then you're not actually shaking anything up. It's just a big mess. Lying on the floor.
Yeah, well, that's what I want to talk about with let's pass out like every production decision and my issues with, and because that's the thing. So the original twist to split them up and to have one tribe immune, it's not so revolutionary. Like, this is the final 10 twist, I hope, in lieu of the final 10 twist. We're not doing this again next week, right? Are we getting a vote next week? Like, TBD on that to begin with, and I've lost all faith and trust. But this vote in and of itself is not that bold. Like, it's basically what we've been getting at the final 10, but one group is immune. So that in itself, let's already go back to that. That in itself, the final 10 twists that we've been getting in the new era, we started off with Ghost Island. It's okay in Ghost Island. Like, that's a 39-day season, 2 big tribes, swaps, dynamics, intrigue, you merge for a couple of rounds, and then maybe you want to shake it up. So that was kind of interesting. Yeah. It wasn't great to lose maybe like something we've been losing like a final 9. We've, had the chance with Do or Die to lose final 7s. Now every iteration of the merge is off the table, these pivotal votes in Survivor. But that was kind of interesting. But it wasn't, it wasn't amazing. We didn't need it every season. It was an intriguing idea at a 39-day season. Now that it's a staple I don't think that's necessary. I don't think we ever should have had it in a constricted 26-day game. They lost time due to COVID, and I get it. Money, budget, it's all like it's commercial property, I understand. But at that point, and I've been saying that, then like at that point, surely at that point you're going to the final two, you're taking out fire. Like once you've lost days, surely you're trying to seek more strategy and intrigue into it. But instead it became like, let's shake it up with these double boots, with the half tribal. And I don't think it works in a 26-day format. I don't think it has worked to do it every season of the new era, let alone at all. And now the main issue with that is then it's been on top of the fact that this season has had probably the least room to breathe that I've ever seen. You know, no round except the Sarah vote where 2 votes were nullified has everyone just voted, just used their own vote and voted. So it's so super constricted. So that anyway is not an amazing twist. Putting it in here is not revolutionary, but it's also, and then there's more this episode. So it's the amalgamation of everything on something that wasn't that good, on something that doesn't fit in this era to begin with, and then everything else, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that to me it feels like each episode wants to be self-contained. Like each episode has to be its own thing. This is the Mergatory episode. This is the split the tribe into two with one side being immune episode. Before that, it was the somebody gets medevac episode. Before that, it was the there was like there's a swap, with an idol, and somebody's gonna play an idol, and it's gonna be all wild. And I feel like the storytelling goes along with that, where like, yeah, there are things that carry over, but for the most part, I think each sort of strategic motion in the game is being set up in that episode for a resolution in that episode. This is, and sometimes very directly, like we are literally, you couldn't have strategized for this until the second half of this episode. And sometimes it's like, okay, well, we could have set this up and we actually set up different things, like, hey, Carolyn and Jam Jam, they are a duo, except when it gets to the swap, they're actually not a duo anymore. She is actually mad at him. And now we're going to, tell that story. And then now she's not mad at him actually. And it's like, I feel like that's part of why it feels so constricted. I feel like the long-term storytelling is just not there, and they're trying to like hit at every episode. Like they've lost faith in the long-form kind of storytelling of Survivor, which is a shame, because like that was a huge strength of Survivor. I mean, especially in the early days, it's one of the big benefits they have over a show like Big Brother, because they know the outcome. I definitely think that like the winners edit stuff has gotten into their heads, with these past few like edits of the winners. So I have to imagine that that's part of it. But I don't know why they're so concerned about this, because I feel like the show just went on to Netflix and all that stuff, and I feel like it just obtained a new audience who watched those older seasons and loved those. And so I feel like, and obviously like the dedicated fan base that's been here for a while doesn't seem super happy about this new shift either. And this is coming from somebody too who I kind of liked some of the direction of these new seasons. I was probably defending the 41, 42, even 43 more than most people were. I like the focus on backstory, the emotional angle of like, how a person's story connects to how they're playing the game, and the different ways that they've decided to edit certain things. I was enjoying that, but I do feel like I'm starting to when I think about 41, 42, 43, I can remember individual moments occasionally, but like what was the through line? I don't really know. Like Shan in 41, right? And then Jesse had a trio of episodes last season. Like there's not really like a long-term story that these seasons seem to tell.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely gets lost because of the repetition, despite how twisty this season is, which I think is interesting. I mean, we're two people who I think are higher on modern Survivor in the last several seasons than most. Yeah. We're both obviously clearly high on Winners at War. I love 42. I continue to love 42. But I think it's interesting, like Malcolm Freeberg had an interesting thread about how, like, the show's not good. But like it needs to be new and flashy. It's like a 23-year-old show, right? This I'm just like really like go read the thread. I'm absolutely just like summing it up here. But you know, Jeff has to go in and sell these new twists to keep it fresh, to keep people in suits who don't understand the show intrigued. Sell the show and then give it to us, and then sell the twist to us. Like keep going with that through line. But the interesting thing that you're talking about and like not being able to like pull out the threads is like it's also stagnant. It's like such an interesting combination of stagnant and too overwhelmingly flashy. Like if you want to sell to me, and I've never had to do it, but if you want to sell to a network, surely it's like new flashy thing, the birdcage. That's kind of the big anchoring theme or twist or newness like that. And that was an interesting idea, so we're going to do that. But how, like, what are they selling to the suits that is, and it's the 4th season in a row where they're in the tiny tribes and there's basically no swap. We're gonna the new flashy thing is we'll swap one of them around and then give them all idols, but we're gonna keep it really constricted. We're still gonna do Murgatory, and then we're gonna add this other thing like the next week, or we're gonna change that, and that's gonna be the big twist. Like then it gets so messy. Like if there's a, you know, well spaced out interesting things that I can see being sold to the network, but when they're making decisions that I don't think any, oh, wow, like another season of Tiny Tribes, or a whole season that's entire theme is doing the last thing that the last season did because these specific players didn't see that. Like, I don't see how that's relevant commercially. I don't see how that pulls in viewers. I don't see how it makes it a better product. And I don't see how it sells it to the network. So I can't believe that those are things that they're having to do to keep the show relevant, because it actually is really stagnant in the new era while also being overwhelming. So I don't trust the judgment, at least on the stagnancy. And at that point, I have to trust the judgment. Oh, I mean, I have to doubt the judgment overall, that they're just making, again, I can't say bad creative decisions because that feels entitled. Creative decisions I don't agree with for the sake of it, or because that's their viewpoint, not because it's something they need to do commercially. Because there's so many things to that would be, to me, really, really confusing. And it's interesting, I think, as well, that when we look back on how we've been positive, some luck has been had. Knowledge is power not working out, and instead creating fear in the players and their actual agency in trying to circumvent that, and then suffering for it has been really interesting. Do or die never hitting. You know, thank you, Survivor Gods. There's been luck in the first 3 seasons. But unfortunately now, the twists are so extreme now, and I've talked about how 44 is a different season and show to even the new era. It's so far past where even the new era was, considering how different a show that was in ways. So the luck's run out in the fact that they can't outrun these twists. The players can't even find their own agency in that, because there's now, that space has been eradicated. But even in that, they're not lucky anymore. You know, like the more boring group has lost the last 2 weeks. I think we get a more interesting show if the other group loses this week and last week. So they couldn't rely on that the whole time. 42 is an amazing season based on a great cast, and the fact that the twists don't have as much impact as they should due to a lot of luck. And that's gone now. And also it's harder to find the space for the players. So yeah, I think that's contributing as well.
I think the producers are trying to manufacture the game rather than let the players create the game organically.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, very clear. You know, when you're talking about like how is Jeff pitching this to like network execs or whatever, I would imagine the pitch is every episode is going to have something that pops. Right? Like every episode there's going to be
confessionals and Carolyn's confessionals. That's what it is. That's what it should be.
In Jeff's mind, it's, you know, in this episode, an idol's going to be played for sure because we swapped everyone onto a new tribe with an idol. In this
an advantage
episode,
is going to be played because it has to be played in this episode again.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And in this episode, yeah, there's an advantage, and there's somebody might get screwed, and hey, maybe they didn't bring their bag, like, so it's funny because it made me think about another show that I loved back in the day, ER, which was a very long running show that was a very good show for a very long time. But there were big moments in ER that had a lot of build up, big dramatic moments. And then over time, as it got into its later days, as a Survivor player might say, it got to the point, this is like a thing, almost every episode became a very special episode, where like something dramatic would happen, right? And it completely killed the show. Because if every episode is a very special episode, then no episode is a special episode. And I feel like that's the issue that that we're having here, or at least the people who are having an issue. Because I know, and I want to be clear about this, I'm sure we both agree, there are people who don't have an issue with this. There are people who are enjoying the season, and for those people, I'm sorry we're spending so much time talking about this. Yeah.
Oh, they're frustrated by the segment, but then so many people are not. I know that to be true. It's polarizing.
Like especially like, first of all, these are our feelings, so obviously it would be disingenuous to not express them. And then second, this is a discussion that's happening across the community. So
I don't think we're alone in these thoughts somehow.
Yeah.
Yeah. The question thread that I put up for the podcast was a lot of make it stop. When will this end? So like, I've dedicated my life to this show. What should I do about my identity? Like, felt like there was
and I'll be clear about this too. Like, I've seen some people like, I don't know if I have a future with this show anymore. That's not me. Like, I'll keep watching. Like, it's still Survivor to a degree, even if it's not good Survivor anymore. Yeah, it's not a huge commitment in comparison to other shows.
20 years of my life to 40 minutes a week. Like, that's basically how I see the commitment there.
But I don't know. For me, I find criticism to be very fun, especially when it comes to like creating things. And so whenever I don't enjoy something as much as I want to, I love exploring why and how it could be better for me. And hopefully that can resonate with other people. If not, then at the very least, hopefully it's interesting to hear a perspective of how another person approaches this and why they might feel a certain way about it. So, but yeah, I do feel like it does kind of all come together. The structure side of it, where it's like trying to manufacture big events every episode, and then that's trickling into the editing side as well, where they're so scared of telling us the truth about what's happening so that they can keep all of their goodies behind the curtain and surprise us with them whenever they can. And so, like, for me, it's just noise. It just becomes noise if I'm not like following it. And this is something, for a good example of shows that do this, Vince Gilligan, Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul, so good at making sure that small moments exist so that the big moments pop, and building to those things. And that's something that's, again, Survivor has done in the past. I still remember to this day, like the Pearl Islands, like the fall of Rupert is a storyline that is telegraphed for episodes at a time, like episodes ahead of time. And like when it happens, it's like this big dramatic moment, and it's kind of subtle in how they edit it, but it's very clear that they're editing it like this big grand tragedy. And maybe that's uneven editing, but again, I'm not like super mad at that. But it's something that like they were building to. It's something that felt like, they cared about the craft of a long-term storyline, and that's something that I definitely feel like I'm missing, both structure-wise and edit-wise, in this season and in the last couple.
Yeah, well, if you want long-term, beautiful Survivor story arcs, they are happening this year in, International Survivor. I think that, what people would say about the season of Australian Survivor, and I'd really encourage your listeners who haven't checked it out to check out definitely so much good Survivor and International Survivor. But the best thing people would probably say about that season this recent season of Heroes versus Villains, is that the long-term story arcs were beautiful. Like, truly some of the best I've ever seen. 24 episodes, and you'd follow it, and there was irony, there was humor, there was tragedy, it was all the things. It was incredible storytelling. And it's interesting that we say, like, there's so many things. Like, a couple of things that I'm thinking is so much of it, I think, is created, what they're creating from is actually, there's boredom of their own product, I think. And then there's fear. We talk about, like, they just so badly don't want a Pagong to happen. They're like terrified of the Pagong. They were terrified of not getting the winner. That's why the winner that they wanted, that's why they made Final Threes. That's why they made Fire. They I think, creating from a place of fear of not getting what they want. International Survivor, actually, so many of the great things we say about it is because it has a reverence in many ways for the US franchise, but old school US franchise. So yes, we're commending International Survivor often, but we're commending it because it's what we used to have in the US. Like, it's looking up to its big older brother, and that older brother is so far past it. It's not cool to that older brother anymore. And something we've both just said has made me realize something. You say they want to manufacture outcomes. That's obviously true. I say that the luck has run out. It hasn't run out. It's been stamped on. Because when I say, they got so lucky, knowledge is power didn't work. They got so lucky, do or die didn't hit.
Yeah.
That's not luck to them. They're like, we didn't get what we want, and we're done with that. We're done to leaving things
And
to
they're
chance.
altering things to make sure these things are happening even more.
Yeah. That's not luck to them. That's that failed. That actually didn't happen as we thought. And was it more interesting? No, because it's not what we wanted. So now they're clamping down more. Yeah. Idols will be played more. We didn't get like a traditional idol play that nullified the majority votes, or really any votes for 3 seasons. That was interesting. That wasn't to them. Let's put in idols for an episode that'll definitely nullify votes, and it does. So it's actually like the space is being taken out. Not that the luck has happened to run out. Obviously, more is being done, but it's done for that purpose, so that agency in that space is being taken away. So I've just realized that, and I'm like, I see the different perspective that they have, and when I feel like this was a lucky thing, and they see that the do or die episode actually didn't hit. That was meant to be the very special episode, but actually was a cool final 7 vote that was so much better. How do you not see that that's better? Because they're set on what they want. So, I mean, look, I agree with you. When this kind of thing happens, my want is to rant. I enjoy it. You know, like I think like this is the only way I can engage with the show in its current form, is to just write down everything that's making me angry and why. Not just like I hate this for the sake of hating it. Here's my issues. And if you agree, hopefully that's cathartic. And if you don't, that's fine too. But again, like hopefully you enjoy that other perspective. But they're doing things that are so extreme. So of course I'm going to have an extreme reaction. Obviously I have a lot of extreme reactions anyway, but how can I not? And, you know, to kind of, I guess, move on from the general kind of structure of that, in terms of extreme reactions, the thing I hated most in this, and you alluded to it, Matt not being able to bring his bag. I know it seems like a small thing, but it has enraged me for so many reasons. Like, firstly, it was just sad. Like, this whole episode I felt was tragic, but not in a fun way. I love tragedy. I like being sad by the show. Anyone who's listened to my recent coverage of International will know that probably my favorite episodes were when someone tries to do something amazing, they almost get there, it's going to be the best thing you've ever seen, and then they just fail. Like, tragic, beautiful, meaningful tragedy. And this was not that. This was someone getting put in a horrible position. Matt Blankenship having production tie his hands behind his back and beat him up again. You know, like, and Franny watching from the sidelines and crying. Like, there is a world in which Matt gets blindsided in a meaningful way, and Franny is crying in that way, and it's beautiful, as built on the back of this extraordinary social connection that we can see. Clearly a romantic connection that has panned out to a relationship that must be going on a year now. Like, that is so compelling. And if he gets blindsided, it's upsetting to me, but it's beautifully upsetting. It's interesting. It's so compelling. But that's not what this is. Like, this is hugely constricted, and Matt has no options, as we'll talk about. There's no player agency. It's just production. So it's not fun to me. So then you go to him not being able to bring his bag. I asked Omar, like, were you made to bring your bags to, like, the final 10? Did you get your bags? He was like, we were told to bring our bags everywhere. Like, that was, so maybe that's what it is. They're meant to bring their bags, and Matt doesn't bring his bag. That's a meaningless thing to me. So now he doesn't get a shot in the dark. He doesn't get to bluff with his fake idol. Is that better TV? If they want them to have the shot in the dark so that it's not a slow, inevitable march to the guillotine, give him his freaking shot in the dark. If they want him to, they're putting fake idols in the game, let's see him try to bluff with it. We can talk about it. I think there would have been a lot of legs there. But instead they just wanted to be sad and done. And for what? Because he left his bag? What did we learn about him? Is that meaningful? That's not someone not bringing their idol to a tribal council. That's meaningful. That person's getting blindsided. That person's being arrogant. What did we learn about Matt Blankenship? It's like a parent being like, I told you to put that in your school bag, and you didn't, and now you're going to go all day without it. Like, Matt Blankenship is not a 6-year-old needing to learn a lesson. He's someone who meaninglessly didn't bring a bag to a challenge, and now the entire episode is being set up on a really boring logistical decision when an intern can run and get the bag, and we can get better TV from someone who has at least a shot in the dark, which is something producers clearly want. And his idol, which is something that will be interesting because we can see how we can strategically bluff with it. But instead, they like, this meaningless thing becomes a plot point, and it's logistics. That's so boring to me as TV, and it's such a bad television decision. I'm actually so angry about it.
Yeah, I mean, I almost wonder, like, if he had just asked for his bag and like didn't make a thing of it. Like, because
right.
we know that the rules are what they dictate they are. And if they think it'll make better TV for him to have his bag, they'll give him his bag. And if they think it'll make better TV because he's
Well,
like,
but it
and
did
now
make
I'm
better
even more
TV.
screwed because I don't even have my bag. And they're
Matt
like, ooh, this is
Blankenship,
actually
the
good
idiot.
TV.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it wasn't good TV. Like,
and
they,
I agree.
Like, yeah.
I think that's the thing. And, you know, I thought it was interesting because in this episode, we have an exchange between Matt and Brandon about getting screwed, right? And they included this specifically as a rebuttal to what they expected to be the criticism of this episode, right? Which I think in itself is a misread on the audience. Like, I think there are people upset about how Matt got screwed, but I think there are also people, even more people, upset about just the nature of Survivor nowadays, more so than like an individual got screwed. But I think they were like, people are going to be mad about Matt, but don't worry. That's the point. They're going to be, it's beautiful tragedy, as Shannon would call it. But it's not. I think I completely agree with you on that. But yeah, I mean, Matt says, you know, you can be as good at Survivor as you want to be, but if things don't go right for you, then, you know, sometimes you can just get screwed. And Brandon says, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think you can get screwed, but there's always a way out. Right. So there's always a way
like
that
if
you can
5 people play an
it.
idol and there's 6 people in the game, you get 0 votes.
Then, you know, should have had an idol, I guess, is sort of the thing, right? And this is sort of like the classic. I mean, I am very familiar with this as a Big Brother watcher, because this is absolutely the take that Big Brother producers have of like, yeah, we will absolutely screw people over, but there was that 0.05% chance that if they had done this and this and this and this, they would have survived. So were they really screwed, or do they actually just suck at the game? And that's kind of the attitude, right? Like, you can get screwed. Like, you can be an amazing player, but if you run into an incredibly difficult situation, then all of your decisions are much harder. You're playing on a much harder difficulty than somebody who's not getting really screwed over, right? And so that doesn't make you less screwed or less of a player. It just means that, you know, you got screwed, you got unlucky, and that is the thing, and you shouldn't shy away from that. I think the fact that the you know, production itself, because I'm sure this was also like a dig at Danny, right? Like, and you know, the argument that Jeff got into, you know, when they did the hourglass twist the first time, like no, this is, you know, play through it, be a better player, you know, that's the game. It's like, yeah, that is the game. And people can get screwed, and people do get screwed. People have been screwed throughout the history of the show. That's not the issue. But, you know, when they get screwed, at least give them the grace of like, oh, they got screwed. You know?
Yeah.
Like,
so many things about the Brandon thing. I mean, the first thing being, like, you're about to send Matt to the jury to be like the mayor of Ponderosa. Like, why are you like, you should have been better, mate. Like, you should be saying the opposite. Like, yeah, sometimes it just do be like that. Like, sorry, like, that sucks for you. It does. Like, the unfortunate situation for you. Like, why would you say that to a juror? Also, Brandon, you have been vulnerable for 0 rounds of this game. I have been vulnerable as much as Brandon. He had an idol in the first tribal council. He never went back because of the tiny tribes, 3 tribes. He was immune last week. He was immune this week. He was swapped into a majority. Brandon, please. Jamie, it measures the social bonds. You were swapped into a majority. I appreciated Lauren so much for being like, God was on my side today. Yeah, that's the right way to look at that. Thank you for being honest about that. Like, people get screwed in Survivor. People have always gotten screwed in Survivor. Luck and circumstance have always been a part of the show, and that's fine. Like, it's a beautiful, complex game to a degree. That's always going to be a thing. The best player doesn't always win and doesn't need to. Like, there's layers, complexity, circumstance that have always mattered. The more production push, the more that circumstance will fully override meaning. And I do think that this is like such a good example of that, of like, where is the meaning? Like, you want to be able to find, even within some of the randomness of a game, or even within circumstance, which is what can happen, where are we finding meaning? So that's why I look at that's like that's why I look at the bag thing as such a perfect example of that. Like, Matt Blankenship, to naming him now every time, but if he has played a shot in the dark like Matthew did in a novel way, or needed it and saved himself, that would speak to where his game is at, or played it erroneously, you know, misunderstood where he was, thought he needed it, didn't, wasted it, and now doesn't have a shot in the dark, and now it's a march to the guillotine. There's meaning in that. He did something. He, you know, you weren't part of that. We can find that meaning. But he just didn't have his bag. I learned nothing about him as a player from that. Like, it's just sad and frustrating. So yeah, I think that this is all basically personifying like the issues that we have with the show in that. But yeah, in terms of talking about it, like there's always a way out. You know, someone's gonna get swap screwed, like that will happen. But I think the frustrating thing about the season is it's felt like such a running theme. Like, how often do we feel that person has been screwed by production more of the time? At least several times a season. Not that many people have gone home. You know, and Matt
Yeah.
Blankenship, yeah, I agree with you. Like, maybe there is something where they want the confessional. He's like, I'm such an idiot. I'm like, you didn't do anything. It's fine. They beat up on Matt Blankenship for 7 straight episodes as if he was moronic for falling for a fake idol that they planted and then he sniffed out clearly a long time ago. And, you know, we hear about that in Exits. And it was clearly, as he said, it contributed to the Josh vote. Once Josh goes, it directs him straight to Danny. And then, like, he's put even more 2 and 2 together. Like, such a credit to him that he was doing that. That's all behind the scenes. If anything, he's being not frankenship, but frankenbitten in the confessional when he's saying, I have an idol. We don't see his mouth move in that because it's obviously an old confessional. So they're hiding, you know, how much, like, to simplify that narrative, and I understand, but they're hiding how much he knows. They're showing every single time he falls for this, like, production thing. And then for him to go out in this way, you know, he compared himself to Eric Reichenbach in the preseason. This is not Eric Reichenbach. This isn't players coming up with an amazing thing and playing someone, which is the best thing you can see in Survivor. Almost everyone's favorite moment in the history of the show. It's production doing that. That's not fun because I'm not here to see the players play production. I'm here to see them play against each other and then for one person to win.
Yeah, I think it again. It just kind of boils down to, for me, the show Survivor is built by the cast. The cast plays the game. They create the society that they live in for 39 or however many days. They dictate the moves, the strategy, the pace of the game, and production is there to film it, to show it to us in an interesting way, and to maybe shake things up to make sure that it's not going to, straightforwardly. That's sort of my ideal version of the show. I think that's why the show has lasted for, into its 24th year or whatever it is. I think that it's the fact that it's people and the casting. They naturally evolve. The gameplay naturally evolves over time based on where we stand as a society, based on current trends and the way that people are cast. Things shift in an organic way. The cast creates the show. I don't think that production right now likes that. They want to create the show. They want to create the storylines. They want to manufacture gameplay, manufacture stories and edits. It's what we're seeing in Big Brother Canada as well. They took away live feeds because they don't like reality being shown to us. They want to control the narrative. They want to show us their version of the story because they think that they can tell a better story than their cast can. And I fundamentally disagree with that. I think there are only so many stories production can tell us. There are an infinite amount of stories that a cast of 16 to 18 to 20, however many players, can tell us. And I think that is the mistake that they are making. And that's, that's again, like the idea that like, oh, you can't get screwed. You just didn't jump through our hoops good enough. Is kind of like, well, just can you let them try? Can you let them play a little more? Can you, you don't need so many hoops, actually.
And it's like,
okay.
you didn't jump through our hoops good enough, but also you had the secret leg tie disadvantage that we tied around your legs, but you like Matt Blankenship was like on the floor like as a worm, like, like trying to squint, and they're like, you're not jumping through, and he's like, you tied my legs together, and they're like, well, that's on you, like that's how it felt this whole episode.
Mm-hmm. And because they want his legs tied, but I think that they're perfectly fine with being like, yeah, look at this guy tripping all over himself. What an idiot, right? What, tied legs? You don't see any rope. What are you talking about?
I agree with that. And wouldn't we say that these are decisions based in fear? Like, I think that that's what it is. And I don't know a lot about the Big Brother Canada situation, although I have listened to some of your rants on the podcast just because, again, I enjoy it. I don't even watch the show and I enjoy it. I liked how you described it as Scrub Season 9. Maybe something here that we could compare to this season.
Yeah.
And I think that they don't want to give it to the cast because I think that I've always said that like casting is like 80% of a season. Like if you have a good cast, like that's pretty much going to be okay. But it's again those decisions made in fear with like Big Brother Canada for not having live feeds because what could go wrong? That seems fearful. Here as well, like what, you know, who knows what the cast will do? What if they have a boring episode? What if they have a boring episode where not a lot happens? How will we survive it as a 23-year-old show? That might be the end of us. We better make sure nothing's ever boring. And ironically, then Matt Blankenship even said, people obviously start to play more conservatively, and it's the same thing over and over. For us, it's much more stagnant and in many ways more boring. This vote, very boring. 3 Ratus having to take out a Soku. How could they not? Compared to what would have been something interesting, like actually in their like attempts to control things, it definitely like can and does backfire. So yes, it is like the need to control, and ironically, they have that control when they cast the show so well. They have the control because they put those players in, but then they don't give them the agency to play. And I want to talk about that with the vote, because I feel like one of my most irritating narratives this week, here's my new pet peeve. People saying, you know, well, Matt, he could have at least outlasted Jam Jam. You know, well, like Jam Jam outplayed him. And I love Jam Jam so much. And I think his social game is phenomenal. And he will be rewarded in Chissy. He's the best. He's the best. Like, and I don't want to take away from him. I think he played the situation perfectly. I think he has the best social game I've seen in a long time. And I think that didn't contribute to the vote, because they told me over and over, like, if you think that Jam Jam just socially outplayed Matt, maybe people picking up on the vibes of that because it's more palatable that that's what happened, because it's more meaningful. I want that to be true as well. I would rather that is true. But I can't just make it up in a way to make myself feel better, because I have to listen to the players when they speak to my face in a confessional in a way that's clearly not frankenbitted. Lauren tells me, Jamie tells me, they want to weaken Soka. Matt can't help that he's the only Soka on a majority Ratu tribe, and they're incentivized to have this golden opportunity to take a hit. And the conversation actually becomes, should we start the war? Like, we're going to piss off his people, but we also have this opportunity. So it becomes, do we kind of like bide our time, take out Jam Jam, actually piss off swing votes, maybe push Tika away, someone like Carolyn away, maybe someone like Carson away? Or do we take the shot now and then try to win the war later off the back of this like pivotal move in a short game? Seems pretty obvious to me. Again, it's not player agency. I think well done to Jamie, Lauren, and Brandon for following through on the course that they're laid out on. But I also think like production puts them on a course and then they walk through it. Now, again, commend that, because I feel like they put Heidi on a course and then she kind of fell sideways. So not everyone's necessarily going to walk the steps that production puts out for you, and well done to them for that. But I also think I can't give it so much credit when I feel like it's so much more production than them. I feel like it's an obvious move for them to make. And I don't think as is Jam Jam socially outplaying Matt? Maybe that's true, but it's not even something we're necessarily hearing. They're both talked about as social threats, and it's also not the reason this decision was made.
And Jam Jam was the alternate vote in the previous tribal, which is like we were supposed to be told essentially that Kane out socialized Jam Jam in the previous vote, but we're also being told that Kane is terrible socially. And so it's like, what is the message here? The message here is that none of it matters. That none of it's true. And this kind of like basic, like top level decision making is encouraged by this format of like, okay, all of the plans that you're trying to make, none of them matter. And now you have a couple of hours to figure out what you're going to do. A couple of hours is not enough time for Matt or Jam Jam to do anything meaningful when there's a group of 3. The conversation that's going to matter is Brandon, Lauren, and Jamie talking through what they want to do, regardless of what Jam Jam or Matt have to say. Maybe there, and again, this is where you can say, well, a good player can always find a way. And to a degree, that's true. But it shouldn't, you know, it like because I could say, okay, well, maybe if they're concerned, if Matt is you know, omniscient and he knows exactly why Lauren, Brandon, and Jamie might vote him out because they want to weaken Soka. Well, maybe
he does know that.
If there's a way for Matt to go to Brandon, Lauren, and Jamie and say, listen, I know you might want to weaken Soka, but I'm actually against Danny because he gave me a fake idol and like all of this stuff. And good enough, he's able to do that well enough that they believe him. And so it can be like, yes, listen, you keep me around, and then you won't have to take a shot at Soka. I will be taking a shot at Soka with you next time, and I will be there to bolster your numbers to win that war, like so on and so forth. Maybe that's a situation that can work, and maybe it has no business working because there's all kinds of other complications that I don't know about. Maybe Brandon, Lauren, and Jamie are actually fully aligned with Carson, Jam Jam, and Carolyn at this point. Maybe they feel like they've got them. Right? Like I don't know, because we don't actually know the dynamics of these tribes. But so maybe there were ways for Matt to get through this according to, the limited perspective that I have. But it's a situation where like it's like trying to take out the Death Star. It's like there's that one little vent. But like unless Matt is a Jedi, and what about the Jedi?
Like, what about the Jedi?
But it's not gonna happen. So
very smooth. Yeah, great segue. Well, Matt did go to Ratu in a secret scene. He went to Jamie Lynn, and he said, "This is what Danny did. Here's why I'm incentivized to go against Danny." I think they even showed flashbacks to him talking about the idol plant. And poor sweet Jamie Lynn, in a Jamie Lynn way, was like, "I don't believe him," even though we literally got
there you go.
Flashbacks. And he had been throwing Danny under the bus, which was something he was actually like putting in motion before, really, and he said in Exits, timing would be weighed up. But he was really thinking about it. He had already voted out Josh in terms of weakening Soka, in terms of showing that. I thought he was really leading that. Last week, clearly he was. He thought Josh might have the idol. So in terms of like being less Soka, which is basically the only thing I think he could have done here because he was being targeted for being Soka, he did all of that. And Jam Jam's not just not Soka. He's also a lone wolf to them, or part of Tika, which is potential swing votes. So you don't want to burn that bridge. I say as later Heidi literally will. But it's something you don't necessarily want to do. So I don't see the vent. Is that what it was? A vent in the Death Star?
I think so, right? Like a little vent.
I haven't seen Star Wars in like well over a decade, but I don't see it because I
guess the vent in this case is okay. He made that move, but maybe if he had been better socially, he could have convinced them that he was telling the truth, right? Which
not for logical players, I feel.
Right. Well, that's kind of my point. Is like you can always find. Well, if they had just done a better job, then they wouldn't have failed. But that doesn't like if you do that to death, then nobody is ever capable of like just being in a harder spot than an easier spot, right? Like this is an incredibly difficult spot to get out of. Only a couple of hours to campaign, and in a completely new situation, isolated from the rest of the tribe. He can't even have like Franny there to back him up and be like, no, we've been talking about this. He can't even like whoever I think he went to Kane. He can't even bring Kane in and be like, yeah, I've talked to Kane about this already. Like I'm all for this. Like he doesn't even have his back, right? Like there are all kinds of different things that get in the way of a situation like this. The fact that he has to plead for his life in the first place when he was never in that position prior to this twist is another mitigating factor. So like when it comes to like this idea of like you can't get screwed because there's always a way out, it's like, well, what is the way out? Is it a nice wide open door that you can just walk through, or is it a tiny crawl space that only a contortionist can fit through?
Yeah.
Like there's a difference.
Yeah, and in terms of it coming down to like the social game, like socially being outplayed by Jam Jam. And again, I think Jam Jam, I don't want to discredit him in this because I think he's amazing. I just don't think that it matters to this result. Like, does it matter that they want to hang out with this person for the next, 10 days? Like it's not about a social game. Like it's so short. It's about super fan players, knowledgeable players. Heidi will get to you. But most of the time making logical decisions in a pathway that has been laid out for them. And that's what Ratu do here. No one ever mentions, but I just like Jam Jam more. Actually, at one point, they're like, well, Jam Jam's a social threat, and it's spoken about with Matt as well. So that's like the only thing we hear about, like, both of their social games. All we hear is, we do hear, like, you want to weaken the couple. We want to weaken Soka. We hear that multiple times. And that's what they should do. It's like, do you want to, like, make a strong tactical move in a game where there aren't a lot of votes? Literally, that like not a lot of people vote, but there aren't a lot of even rounds. Like, do you want to progress forward? Or do you want to be like, this is a good social option for me to kind of half work with for the next week, because that's what the game is. They're going to make like the strong strategic move when put in like pound position, the ball's put on the tee, like you knock it out of the park. So I don't really see what he could do here. Maybe had he had his fake idol, even though he'd outed it, but again, Jamie didn't believe that. Like Jamie of all people was like, maybe he's lying about it. Maybe then we see an interesting thing where it becomes, how can you bluff with this fake thing, the rock in the pocket that Rupert once had? You know, and he can try to do that. And he even speaks about that. I don't even have my fake idol, you know, to try and do something with it. They can't split without using Lauren's extra vote. Maybe then at least it flushes an extra vote. They properly split to make that happen. Or maybe it shifts the target to Jam Jam. Now that would be an interesting thing. But then he can't have his bag. And producers are thinking that's better television to keep his bag on a different island from him, when that's an interesting out. Like that's interesting.
Here's another one though. Matt versus Jam Jam. I'd be willing to bet I have an idea of who producers like more for the show. Maybe that's another reason why Matt doesn't get his bag here.
Producers do not like that Blankenship, right? Like what was that thing with him?
I mean,
they just wanted him to be Eric
at least in comparison to Jam Jam.
I want that gratification.
And like, who wants to go up against Jam Jam in a popularity poll? Like,
but here's the thing. Fair. Let's say here's how screwed we are in this position. Let's say Matt gets his bag. He has an idol given to him basically by production quality idol with paper and everything, and he gets to bluff with that idol. Now it's Jam Jam that's getting screwed, right?
Yeah, like, I wouldn't enjoy that either. I'm not enjoying that either. Like
because of Matt's fake idol.
Yeah, either way. I mean, that's why like this whole I was like, Matt is crying at Tribal Council because he knows his game is done. He doesn't even have a freaking shot in the dark. The dignity of the shot in the dark that they're all meant to be afforded because he forgot his bag. Anyway, I'm gonna have to get past it. And Jam Jam's crying, and Franny is crying, and Carolyn. I think those are my top 4 favorite players in the game. So I'm like, this is just really not very fun for me. And yeah, that wouldn't be a great situation for Jam Jam. But yeah, maybe that is it as well. When they're like, woo, we're in a position where it's not looking good for Matt and Jam Jam. Well, it looks like Matt doesn't have his shot in the dark. I don't want to think that it's that nefarious. I really don't. Like that feels like a lot to me. But if they were happy to make this a slow march to Matt's death for that reason, I don't want to believe that that's true. I think Jam Jam deserves better than that. I don't want to think that producers are interfering on his behalf. I don't think he needs it. Like, I've been so impressed by Jam Jam. I think that he's been easily the most like vulnerable person in this season. On Tika, no idol. I think his social game has been his superpower. Like, even when he's losing the vote in the Sarah vote, I think his relationship with Carolyn is pivotal. Vulnerable last time, vulnerable this time. He's like the anti-Brandon. He's been to some real tribal councils. He's faced some real adversity. I think it's a credit to him. I don't want to say production is saving him, but if God forbid there was any part of like, I'm not giving Matt Blankenship the 1 and 6 for that because we put both of them in the position that they shouldn't be in. They shouldn't even be in that position. But now that they are, like, one's better than the other. I don't even want to go there. But I mean, they've constricted it to that point where that might be a necessary overcorrection at that point. Yeah.
This is my problem, is that they, because of how much interference they are doing with the game, are in a position where they could easily do that. Right? Like, they're in a position where they are in control of whether or not Matt has his bag. And whether or not Matt has his bag could be the difference between Matt staying or Jam Jam staying. And production gets to decide on a very obscure rule of, does he get to get his bag?
And we don't
or does he not get to get his bag?
100%.
Exactly. Whereas,
the players don't even seem to know, clearly.
Yeah, right. So, like, you know, a normal game of Survivor, production would never have control over something so minuscule that would have such a big impact, because the game plays itself, and like the rules are supposed to be written on the advantage itself about how it works and like all of that stuff. But like, when you interfere so much, you get to a point where now you have to, like, whether or not they would, whether or not they have, the fact that they're in a position to is kind of the issue.
The fact that we even have to have this conversation, and it is because there are so many things that they have their hands in that's going to play out in that way. I completely agree. And to talk about that, I mean, I guess we should talk about the other like big twist in the room, which was a bunch of keys.
Oh my God. Talk about terrible TV too. What was 2 minutes of them trying a lock?
Yeah. I don't like when they do that in the challenges. Like, sometimes the challenge is like, try a combination lock and like randomly get it. And I'm like, that's too random for me as a challenge component. Like, I don't like luck and randomness when you should earn something.
Yeah. I've experienced in life before trying to turn a key in a lock and it not working for 2 minutes. And let me tell you, it's not something that I thought, I'd really love to watch this on TV.
Oh my god, that's so like I always struggle with our our outside apartment front door. You should ask Peter. Peter thinks that me struggling is good television. I'm like the shopping in my hand. Obviously, if Peter's with me, he'll help. But like 100%, that's not an enjoyable thing to experience, let alone to watch other people do it. I completely agree. Like, why isn't this a puzzle, a riddle? What is the randomness? And Jeff loved this, by the way. Jeff loved the whole episode of it. Like I saw about it in his podcast. It was great TV, probably because of the tragedy, but it wasn't an earned tragedy. He loved the keys. He said something like that will probably be back. Random luck, no skill. Why not a bunch of keys, but there's a riddle, which if you work it out, you would realize which key is right. And maybe then it's about, okay, you can keep trying them. So it's about possibly like, I'm just coming up with this on the spot, like possibly hustle versus meaning you can be direct of like, okay, I know where this isn't going to work out the riddle. Or maybe you learn that maybe you're thinking, I'm not going to get the riddle. I'm just going to go find a bunch of keys and I'm just going to keep trying them. Maybe then we have an option. Maybe we see how people make decisions. Maybe we see how skill sets come out. Why is it random keys? It was such a perfect analogy for the season. It was meaningless. It could have actually shown player skill. It could have shown player decision making. It could have been a choice. You can go for the keys or maybe have the food. I'm literally just spitballing. I'm coming up with this on the spot. Is this anything? I don't know. But I know that it's more better than just,
at the very least, like me who doesn't even love challenges, at the very least, I enjoy dilemmas and challenges. I enjoy like figuring out, okay, what's the best strategy here? Okay, if I were in that position, would I go for the riddle or would I go for the keys? Oh man, what a bad decision it was to go for the riddle. It's so hard.
About it. Then we podcasters talk about decisions. That's why we love decisions. Like that's why we love agency for any players. Like I don't understand how Jeff thinks that's good television. I think that just maybe shows how we're in a very different place in game design, because what is interesting about that? It's not visually interesting. It says nothing about the players. I'm learning nothing about the players other than the fact that they'll run around looking for keys. They'll be trying keys. And the person who gets it, I learned nothing new about them. It's not earned. It's not interesting.
It's a person I feel like I haven't seen in 5 episodes. I still from the episode perspective, why is Heidi close to Danny? I don't know. I just found out that she was. Why did Heidi want Josh out last week when they were working together the last time she went to Tribal? I don't know. Maybe because of him lying about an idol, but I don't know what that has to do with Heidi. But either way, she really wanted him out. And now she finds this thing and she's like, what do I do with it? And I'm like, I don't know. You tell me.
Well, I feel like she did not come to a good conclusion on that. We can talk about Heidi's decision. Had Heidi solved a riddle that probably Carson already 3D printed, so he probably would have got the keys. But had Heidi solved a riddle to find it, we would have learned more about her. She's good at riddles, and now we know. All we learned was like she found the key. It's not even like, wow, like there was one key and she found out she has good powers of observation. She found like a regular idol, which is boring, like we've seen treasure hunts, but like better than she just found the right key. And we spent time on it. Our precious time! Anyway, that's what we spent the time on. I thought the key thing was extraordinarily dumb, but like almost painfully ironic for what it said about the season. Then she gets the advantage, which is a vote steal. And like it's fine. It's a vote steal. It's maybe a little like it's less powerful than a vote steal because it's like all vote steals are like aggressive in public, but then she also has to she gives them the out of knowing like who she's going to vote for, so they can maybe work around it. They could like split differently. And I think they split how they want to. So it's less powerful than a vote steal. I think all of that is fine. I think it's so much in this episode. It's just that it's too much all around. And I also don't love that it had to be again, and you'll use it this time. Like that's necessary, obviously, for like she's immune now. Like it's a very specific situation because we've contorted ourselves to even be here. But I don't love again that it's like, do the thing. And actually she didn't. She probably didn't do what she was.
All right. Well, I do have maybe a hint of positivity here, sandwiched in negativity, which is that I think this is kind of fun. I like the idea of this style of vote steal where she has to publicly stand up and steal somebody's vote to their face and tell them you are now going to vote for this person. And the way that it's structured, where they were not part of tribal council and couldn't say anything, to me was like, okay, I'm actually paying attention to tribal right now, because what they're saying matters
You
to
don't
what
usually?
Heidi might decide, because she's
Usually just
finding out.
tune out.
Yeah, normally I
Yeah,
tune
the first time it goes in one ear. Actually, not this time because everyone was crying, but usually, yeah.
But Heidi's learning information. Like, Heidi might change her decision based on what she's hearing, so that matters. Granted, this time I still kind of tuned out because it was clear that they weren't really talking much game, and it was also clear that I had no idea what Heidi was thinking at all. So I didn't know what information would change her mind, because I didn't even know where her mind was. But I like the concept. And then she's publicly says, I'm going to make you vote this way. And that could change people's vote at the last minute. Oh, now that we know this person is going this way, let's say, let's say Matt goes, Jam. Let's say she said, Lauren, vote for Brandon. Matt could have gone,
Well,
Jam. Sorry, not
Lauren
Brandon. Jamie.
Jamie vote for Lauren. Jamie has to vote for
Lauren.
Lauren. We'll talk it through, but that's Jamie has to vote for Lauren.
Jamie vote for Lauren.
Yeah.
Matt can go, Jam. Let's do this.
And he said he would have in excess.
And then maybe Jam does it. Maybe he doesn't. But like that's interesting, right?
Very interesting. Now we've got some real decisions happening.
Yes. Yeah. And so I kind of like this. And then also, let's imagine a world where we actually know the structure of the game and the relationships between the players, and the fact that Heidi steals Jamie's vote to vote out Lauren is actually a big betrayal, because they had just been bonding about whatever, right? And there's now, like, there was an alliance that was maybe going to come together, but there was tension. Now it's being set off by this move, and we know the gravity of it in that moment, because Lauren's giving Heidi a look that's like, how dare you? And then the vote doesn't go through because of Jam doesn't go with it, or Lauren plays the extra vote, or maybe it does go through and Brandon's like, I'm gonna get you. I think there's stuff there, but I think that the way that they gave it to us, we were never gonna get any of that gravity, even if it did work, because the way I was watching, I was like, Heidi, I guess I don't know. She could take out Matt. She could take out Jam. She could take out Lauren. They said all of the reasons why she would do all of those things. And I don't know where she is in the game. And so when she was like, I'm going to make Lauren vote for Jam, I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
That
doesn't actually change anything. So
Lauren, like, picking the names. I agree, but I actually think that a lot of this is on Heidi. I feel like there are things that are obscured, which we can talk about, but I feel like I have enough information on this to know that this is very bad. Like, I feel like, like we can derive. This is the most meaning I can derive, other than Franny's decision, which we can obviously talk through. Like, those are like the two meaningful strategic choices I feel being made in this episode, where we can actually see like weight and consequences. And so this is where I feel about Heidi in the advantage play. She really would have been better off doing nothing. It would have been better off had she never got the right key.
Yeah, and I'll just say briefly to finish my point, like the other reason why this doesn't work is because, as you said, this is the like fifth thing that they're introducing into the episode. Like, if this was the mainstay of this particular episode, I think this works.
That's the theme.
Yeah.
They don't even get one theme anymore of the episode.
Right. The fact that there's so much, and it's on top of the previous one where there was so much, on the top of the previous one that was so much. That's where, like, it all just, like, individually decent ideas combined, just a mess.
100%. Super positive. Really good. No, I think for Heidi, so when they're at camp, she does not have a good read on the situation. She's getting different advice. Like, Danny's like, go for Lauren, and Danny's probably right. And Franny, it feels, has a wrong sense of like where the dynamic is. She seems to think that it's going to be more on social bonds, more like I think some people wanted to believe, like Ratu are making the decision, but being pulled more personally, more socially. Brandon seems closer with Matt. Maybe we could go that way. Lauren may be a bit of a swing vote in that way. So if you, in that capacity, take Lauren to vote Jam, then Brandon, Matt, and that zombie vote win out. Then that's like something that gets pulled socially there to Matt. And it's the wrong read from Franny, who's giving that advice. So we could talk about whether Heidi wants to kind of use that. But in terms of what I think she should try to achieve, I think she should try to win for Soka. When she gets to tribal council and Matt literally says, I'm going to lay out the thing. We're fighting for our lives. I am dying. Like, I'm on death row. And Lauren backs it up by being like, well, you could have an idol. Like, she's not like, no, you're okay. We might vote with you. She's like, well, yeah, you might have something. Like, yeah, you actually do. It's called Heidi. Heidi, this is your time. So she's hearing the full dynamics of what should happen. At that point, Lauren becomes like the clear target for a couple of reasons. At this point, Ratu have laid down the war. Like, if it's going to be Matt and like, it's Soka versus Ratu. So firstly, it's the most understandable to vote for Lauren. I mean, in an ideal world, you're putting this big, aggressive, loud public vote on someone. You kind of want them to go home. And if they don't, you want them to understand. So if like you're just receiving their like aggressive war and then hitting it back, lobbing it back, that's fine. So as Stephen explained on Know-It-Alls, if she gets Jamie to vote for Lauren plays her extra vote, it goes to a 3-3. If the zombie vote carries, which I assume it does because every extra vote and vote still in US Survivor has always carried. It could be different. I'm not saying that it couldn't be inconsistent. I'll give it a 90%. If that's true, Lauren goes home. You've just won for Soka, which we could talk about the intention, but I think she should do. If the zombie vote doesn't carry, then you can't win on the revote. But then at least Lauren has had to flush her extra vote to even get to the revote opportunity to win. Then you've weakened Soka, you've taken away this extra vote that they're all worried about.
Well, okay, so let's say Lauren casts her extra vote. It's a tie.
Yeah.
But the vote is on Lauren, so Lauren doesn't vote again.
Exactly.
So whether or
That's
not
why
the
Lauren
extra
has to be
vote
the target.
carries, that doesn't matter either.
But
and it goes back
the
to
zombie vote is what matters. The carrying of the zombie vote is what matters.
Right, because there's only 5 of them.
So this is
yeah.
like Stephen did it, but I can. So it would be, So it would be Brandon, Lauren, and Lauren versus Jam, Matt, and Heidi / Jamie, the zombie vote, and the 3-3. That's why you have to vote for Lauren because, again, like the revote politics of extra votes, we've always talked about this. So then Lauren's 2 votes are gone. Then it becomes just Brandon versus Jam, not Matt, and the zombie vote in the middle. So that the zombie vote is a swing vote based on whether it carries. If it carries, it'll vote out Lauren. If it doesn't, they will win. Like, you can't win that war at that point, but you flushed Lauren's extra vote. Either way, a small to big win for Soka.
Yeah, and the thing is that Heidi is stealing Lauren's vote to presumably alter what they're trying to do. She's firing those shots anyway.
Yeah,
like
well, that's true.
Because this is the thing. Heidi, in doing what she did, she fired shots at Lauren and Ratu by stealing their vote and trying to force their hand to do something they didn't want to do. Then used that vote to cast a vote against Jam, firing shots at Jam and Tika, which also fails. The worst
part, almost.
And then loses and then Matt, the ally that she was trying to save. It was the worst of all possible worlds because she doesn't even flush Lauren's extra vote with it. It was possibly the worst thing she could have done with this advantage.
I can't think of worse. Can we try come up with what could be worse than that? Like, if she wants to help Soka, it's clear. And we'll talk about whether she should want to and whether she does want to. I think she should want to. Mm-hmm. I think that then if like 2 things could happen here, basically. If she plays the advantage right and it works, they've won. We won. Ratu are the bad guys. Like, they try to put us in this position. Like, I think there's a shared trauma that they could really bond with Tika. Like, and the shared victory now. Like, Jam, they weren't going to vote for you, but like, you've just won with us. Then like Jam's hopefully voting with Matt. Like, you've just done it. Like we're bringing Tika over. Carolyn's so enthused. Like, it could really be this like big uniter. Like, we just got to win and let's carry it on. Let's vote out Brandon next time. Like, he's a physical threat. Like, let's keep going through Ratu. And then Heidi hopefully has good relationships once like that big super group's going to like fall apart. But you have like a good majority. And what a great win. What a great claimable move for Heidi in a short game, a few options to actually like really get credit. That's a big win. That's an awesome thing. If she doesn't find the advantage and Matt just goes here, she's never stolen anything. That sucks. But again, shared trauma. Big, bad, mean Ratu who are even more threatening. They have this extra vote. They made Jam and Matt cry. Franny's crying. Carolyn's crying. We lost Matt, but we're coming together against Ratu. We're the group. Yes, like, we lost Matt, but we're going to win the war. Like, in pulling over Tika, I think either of those things are okay. But in finding the advantage and using it this way, now Jam actually didn't get voted for by Ratu. If anything, Heidi voted for Jam. Like, she's the one vote other than Matt who's gone. Now, Jam and maybe with him Carolyn, Tika are incentivized maybe to go with Ratu. Like they've lost that like social pool, and what I think either way, in victory or defeat, could have been a really good unified group. The defeat of her not ever having an advantage, the victory
even
of
if
her
she
using
did
it
have
well.
even if she did have the advantage and tried to get Lauren out,
Yes. And she uses the extra vote and it doesn't carry,
right, like even if the steal a vote had not carried and Lauren stays, just the act of Jam Jam voting with Matt means that now there's tension between Tika and Ratu.
100%.
Yeah, which would have been great.
And we tried and we failed, and we'll get him tomorrow because we're a group now. But like, and especially the way like Carolyn was so excited. Oh my god, Heidi has a thing. Like we bring this is how you bring numbers. Like this is like we have a thing that we're rallying about together because it was found in this like really public way. It becomes this like kind of group conversation. So use it for like not just to help your group, but to create your group for the next time. But to actually, like she even said, I think she actually says the line, "I want to make friends with it and not like gain enemies." I'm like, but you did opposite that. Like you literally did, as you said, like you've actually like tried to control Ratu. Like they could understand that, like they have the power there, but like try to, you know, it's a small amount of agency that players have, like try to control that. And then the worst part is that she has like such a good social thing she says with Jam Jam, apparently. We haven't seen it, but like she tells us. And like to vote, how, like why have to come back and explain that?
And it's not even something that we can be like, well, you know, how could she have known that it would play? Like this was a very predictable result. Like there's no scenario.
The tribal council.
Yeah, unless they are splitting votes, there's no scenario where stealing one vote from Lauren to put onto Jam Jam will change the outcome. And if they are splitting votes and you publicly steal somebody's vote, guess what they're not doing anymore? They're not splitting votes that way anymore. They're going to change it to whatever they're going to do.
Well, that's what they were talking about, splitting like 2-1. They can't properly split without the extra vote, but like split 2-1 in case like Matt and Jam Jam maybe are like separate and like one has an idol. Like there's like other than like
Lauren can just be like, I'm going to put my extra vote also on Jam Jam, you two on Matt, we're good.
But that's probably like that might be what happened. Like they said 2-1. We don't know what that configuration was, and then they would just like adjust to be like, now Lauren's the Jam Jam vote. And even if they weren't going to split, that 2-1 is irrelevant. Like that's why it's fine to split at all. You know, like they'll still go in and win on the revote. There's not a lot of skin off their back unless Jam Jam and Matt have an extra vote. But like they literally can just change around the split. Like,
the only way this takes out Jam Jam is if they were already voting out Jam Jam.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it makes sense on the wrong read if you think it's more like Ratu each individually deciding on social bonds, which Franny does, maybe on the wrong read. But then literally when you get to tribal council and Matt is like, here is the exact thing in truth, and then she doesn't do it. So then you have to wonder, is it so bad that she did it on purpose? Like that's how bad it is that we actually have to want, like, because no one could fumble the ball this hard, right? No one could, like, right. So then you think, is that it? Because we never see Heidi say that she wants to work with Lauren. We are projecting that onto them, and maybe correctly, because we saw them having one interaction last week. To be fair, and it was in a public way, I don't know how she really feels. We've never seen Heidi talk about Lauren. When she suggested Lauren before the split this week, like in the, you know, Danny v. Lauren thing, when they talk about Lauren, her response is a shrug. I will say that. So that's all we know so far. We're projecting that she might want to work with Lauren. There's no evidence of it, but maybe we're correct. We don't know a lot, as you said. Okay, that's not it. Maybe she's worried about Matt, and that's what we hear. Matt's a social threat. Matt's close to Franny. Matt keeps me further from Franny. When we also hear she really likes Jam Jam. So maybe what it is, all right, I actually want to get rid of Matt. I will have better, closer relationships with him out of the way. I'll get closer to Franny. I'm not on a Sokaratu thing. I'm doing my own kind of thing. And we don't know the social dynamics well enough to kind of know how or why that would manifest. And Franny's telling me to vote for Jam Jam. So she can't be mad, even though she might be like, how did you not change the plan when Matt laid everything out at Tribal Council? But it's on Franny. No skin off her back. But even in doing that, even in trying to protect like Franny by using the thing, because if she wants Matt to go, clearly the thing to do is to do nothing. But if she wants Matt to go and to still look good to Franny, then you do this. But in doing that, you've alienated Jam Jam.
Jam Jam, Lauren, Ratu,
yeah, like,
Tika, just to keep Franny, like.
Yeah, like, oh yeah, like Soka. I would rather do nothing. I think I would rather be like, sorry, Franny, like, I just thought, you know, this is how it's playing out. I don't know.
I mean, you can just say, like, if you understood the dynamics well enough to know that, like, this was a failed effort, you could just explain that to Franny. and be like, listen, stealing Lauren's vote will do nothing unless the votes are already there. So I might as well I might as well cast my lot for like just stealing Matt's vote and putting it on Jam Jam. And hoping that they were all voting Jam Jam anyway. Because if I steal Lauren's vote and put on Jam Jam, it won't change anything except put a target on my back and the rest of us, and put Tika, give them to Tika, like all of this stuff. And even that is like you're still pissing off Jam Jam for no reason, and the rest of Tika. Just like sorry, Franny. Like there's nothing I can do. Like I'm not gonna do it. If that's really the case. And if Franny jumps ship, she jumps ship.
Like, if you're weighing up, like, really up, like, because this is what it becomes. If you want Matt to go, he's gonna go. You, like, he's going. Like, you've seen that. You using the extra vote, the stealer vote, will not affect it, other than the fact that, like, Franny thinks you should use it to save Matt. But in using it to attempt to look like you're saving Matt terribly, in a way that we'll criticize, you will piss off, like, the worst person being Jam Jam, and Ratu as well. In this like big public failed move. Is it good to have a big public failed move where you look really silly, even if it was intentional, which by the way, I don't believe it was, and I don't believe it should have been. If you want to let Matt go into that good night, and like I think I'd rather like try and make peace with Franny and like not do the big public bad wrong thing. I think I'd go to Franny and be like, this advantage is a curse. Like I found it and I'm throwing it in the ocean. Like the worst thing for the game I'm trying to play right now, like as like a social woman, like, who like when we make big moves, maybe people will come back on us, like use that as well. Like it's hard out here. The worst thing I could do is stand up, steal a vote from one person, put it on another person when I don't even know if I can save Matt. Like I'm not even, and I would rather do that. And Franny would be like, what? No, like, and she would be upset about it, but try and kind of wager that against doing it. And this is all with the assumption that she's intentionally letting Matt go, but like intentionally letting Matt go by playing this horribly, which again is something we have to consider because it was played that badly, and then pissing off Jam Jam and Lauren in the way that she did it. And I will say, if that was her intention, if her, like as she says, massive social threat, I do not think that is current Heidi's problem. That is future Heidi's problem. Ratu have laid out a war, win the war with a like a big show of strength, like you won it, and then move on later. And then Matt is like a problem for like rounds down the road. I feel like even him coming for Danny, which is something like, is she even picking up on that? Would she even know that? If she does credit to her, like for having that read, everyone at a point is going to come for Danny. And at least if they come for Danny, like they're a safe haven in another group for her because she seems to be tight with Franny and to like have those Soka bonds. Like Matt's definitely talking about Heidi really positively. So these are basically the things. She either actually was trying to help Matt and failed so horribly that this is what we're talking about, or like no one could fail that horribly, no one could play that badly. That's impossible. So she's intentionally letting Matt go. But even in doing that, I think she did that really badly. And if she was trying to do it, I disagree with it based on the dynamics that I know. And that's where I'm at with Heidi and this.
Yeah, I'm with you. What about Franny though? Because Franny also had some decision-making points here.
Yeah.
I've seen some defense of Franny as well, of like hey, what are you supposed to do in the middle of a challenge? Are you really gonna throw a challenge? But basically, if you're not aware of the situation, obviously, the immunity challenge, they were split into two groups. The person who lasted longest within their group got immunity, and then the person who lasted longest overall won immunity for their entire group. So Franny is the final person remaining from her group, and Matt is in the other group. So when Franny is that last person remaining, all she needs to do to guarantee both her and Matt's safety is throw the challenge, drop the ball. Yeah. Her group goes to tribal, but she is immune, and his group is safe, and he is also immune. Given that they were planning to turn against Danny, I don't think that she's super concerned about almost anybody else at this point in the game. That it's kind of like the two of them against the world right now. And I presume that she just didn't think of it. And that if she had thought of it, she probably would have done it. That's my assumption. Especially because like afterwards in confessional, she says, I almost wish that I was the one that wasn't immune. Maybe, but I'm like, that wasn't the choice. It wasn't you or him. It was you and him.
Yeah, you had that capacity.
So I assume that she just, and she's up there for a long time. But I assume it just didn't cross her mind That like that was, wait a minute, if I drop, he's safe and I'm safe.
Yes.
Because in the moment you're just kind of like, I gotta win, I gotta be safe.
Yeah. I mean, I think Steven said it best, like, understandable, he didn't say it like that, I said it badly. Understandable, but suboptimal. I think that's what it is, like, and I don't know what it's like to be in a challenge. For me, like, obviously, yes, it's her and Matt versus the world. It needs to be said. We haven't spoken enough about frankenship, by the way. Like, they're still together. That really cheered me up. Like, after a whole, like, hours of raging and then, like, later, like, to have it confirmed that
Was
they're
that
together.
was that like concern? I assumed they were still
I
together.
kind of assumed. I mean, like, she was quote retweeting my like sweet things about them. Her cover photo on Twitter was them looking at each other sweetly. I'm like, either you're an obsessed ex or you're together. But yeah, I did want to confirm it's very sweet. I'm very, very happy about frankenship. I truly, and like, you know, I watched The Bachelor. Like, I get invested in these couples. It's nice when they work out. And I said, I don't know what's gonna happen, but like, this is true love, and I feel really good about that read. Like, this is real and important, and probably my favorite showmance ever. Like, their relationship is actually a beautiful thing to aspire to. But anyway, beyond frankenship, because yes, this is why he goes home. I really feel, I can't believe you didn't understand frankenship until right now. You've just been going for 7 weeks, just like accepting.
I hadn't heard frankenship until this week. So
wow, that's crazy to me. I feel like we've all been.
I kind of live in my own isolated Survivor
can
bubble
see
because
that.
I exist in the Big Brother world.
Yeah.
And I poke my
enough.
head into Survivor.
Yeah.
I hope that gives my podcast a slightly different perspective, but
Yeah.
it may also occasionally mean that I don't hear frankenship for a while.
Fair enough. I'm glad I got to explain it. I'm glad I got to come in and be that person. But anyway, so on Franny's decision, her, like, she and Matt are versus the world. Like, her and Matt surviving, I think, is like the thing she should want. And like, yes, they've been speaking about silver linings. He's mayor of Ponderosa. They're obviously not this couple threat, but like, in being the couple threat, I feel like Matt was the target. Like, if anything, she lost that buffer and shield pretty early, and there's like really trustworthy ally. Like, that was not to happen now. That was not the time, I feel, for her. I think this is a bad thing, and I think that them both being immune is best. I think she should have thrown the challenge. I want to put that out. But in talking about kind of like how optimal it is in that, I do also want to say, I think there are like some reasons not to. I still think you throw it. I think that, again, I talk about like big claimable moves, like Heidi getting that big win would have been just almost like much more than like Gabler ever did. You know, like that's like the winning move. Like that's like the thing. And it's flashy and people love that. So for Franny, like to have the inspiring challenge moment where she wins for everyone, you claim that. You know, like you talk about it at Final Tribal Council, and it matters, because even like making a fire matters. So I know that something like that in front of what will be the entire jury, clearly, because they're all there, I think it matters to win for all those people in like, you know, 4v1. I think that it's not enough to do it, but I think that there's something there. Obviously getting the sustenance and stuff, like all of that stuff, not enough, but it's there. And then I think like going to tribal council, this is why I say, like, you know, in terms of like some luck running out, like this is the much more boring group, as I think it was last week, to lose. Because if Franny throws it here or they lose, like this is actually quite an interesting group. And I don't know that it's the best for Franny. It's certainly better than Matt going, but like even in her being immune, does Danny go here? It's certainly something they were building to. It's a big play for her to then have to actually flip. And I don't know it's something you necessarily want to force to get like, you want to do it at a point, but you want to like put yourself in the position where you have to do it now because
that's
it's
the
risky
thing.
And it's big.
Does she have to do it here? She's immune and she gets to kind of just like do what she wants. There's 6 votes here. Like, I think there's a world where she's able to just kind of like sit out on this one. And
do you want
like,
that? Are any of these people good for her? Because, I mean, Carolyn might become the out. This is why I think this actually would have been really, really interesting. Carolyn becomes the out. Carolyn has an idol, probably underestimated. Is she choosing who goes? Are people being split on? Are you losing another social option like she seemed to have with someone like a Kane, or maybe even a Carson? Seems like it probably would be Kane. Is that great for her? Better than Matt. But is it so good? I don't know. Is Heidi now suffering for maybe being with Danny? Are they splitting? Surely she's not getting to the point where she's splitting on Heidi and Danny, but does Heidi suffer for it? I don't know that any options in this group are actually great for her. There's no clear, like, pure Ratu out, because they're all on the other side voting out Matt.
I think
Again, better than Matt going, but still.
Yeah, I think what I kind of mean is like let's say Kane and Carson and Carolyn come together. Kane and Carson because of the Nerd Jedi Alliance, and then Carolyn's there from Tika.
That makes sense.
And they're like, hey, there was talk about Danny. How do you feel about that, Franny? And she's like, yeah, I'm totally down. But she goes to Danny and Heidi and she's like, what are you guys thinking? And they're like, we're thinking Kane because I don't know, we don't like him. And And Franny gets to be in the middle, right? And if she feels like she can get the votes onto Danny without him playing his idol, maybe she goes for that. And maybe he plays his idol and maybe it falls onto somebody else. And that's bad for them, but she's immune. So it doesn't matter. And now Danny's without an idol and she's shown that she's willing to work with Ratu against Soka, and her and Matt team up with
Tika,
Brandon and Lauren and the rest of Tika. And now Danny's on the outs with Heidi with no idol. And I feel like that's not bad either.
I think it's interesting. I think putting herself, it would have been, I think that whatever happens here, big gameplay would have been happening. This was really unfortunate because it becomes like, if Carson, you know, is he putting his lot in with the people on the bottom that he's trying to be like hiding that relationship with, and like really working with someone like Kane and Carolyn at that point? Are they really going for Danny? Is Franny making that move now? Matt in Exits is talking like TBD on timing. Like, are you putting Heidi at risk in that? So many interesting things. Is Danny more incentivized? Like, I'm more scared in a small tribe, let me play my idol, but then maybe they put votes on Carolyn, maybe she's playing her idol. Is there a 0-0 vote happening here where like maybe Kane or Heidi suffers for it? I don't know. I mean, I think it actually would have been quite an interesting, definitely not the everyone just vote out, you know, Matt while he cries episode that we got. It would have been a much more, if she throws it, that's already an interesting strategic move. And then we get a much more interesting tribal council. So that is really unfortunate here that we didn't get that.
Can we talk about how bad Franny must feel?
Oh, well, that's fine. Matt's
on top
his
of
true love. You know?
Like I get that, but like I'm putting myself in Franny's shoes, and like the one thing itself, right? I should have thrown that challenge. What was I thinking? I can't believe I didn't throw that challenge. Now, because I didn't throw that challenge, Matt's gone. Like that by itself is like, that sucks. I'd feel really bad about it. Maybe it's an understandable mistake, whatever. It's then the also of, you didn't happen to bring my bag, did you?
Well, he couldn't. Well, Jeff confirmed that she could not even give him the bag. Talk about like dunking even more on Matt Blankenship. Like they couldn't give anything. Like they want safety. Like I think Robert Stevens said this perfectly. Like they want safety without power unless you found a key, the right key to get the one specific power that you could use. But that was the whole point. That's why that was meaningful. Like she couldn't even give him his bag. But why? It doesn't make any sense. The bag thing is just the. I think the bag thing broke me fully. Like I think.
Well, hey, at least look. I think Franny can survive the one mistake. I think the double mistake is rough, but the one mistake, I think you can get over that guilt.
Yeah, like look. I mean, I can't even talk about the bag. I wonder like, who do you think would have gone in that group? I don't know.
I think if Franny tosses Matt the bag, and Matt says "Thank God," and he pulls out an idol, he's like, "Jeff, I'm not going home tonight."
Yeah.
Woo,
oh,
that was a close
probably,
one.
Yeah.
I mean, at that point, you just put votes on Jam Jam, right?
I definitely think that the fake idol
it's not
could
worth
have
the
been
risk.
enough out of fear of the risk, or Lauren plays her extra vote.
Yeah, but then the steal a vote happens, and it's like, okay, now one vote is already on to Jam Jam. You can still split.
At that point you just split it differently. Heidi always has the power to change this. Yeah, like if Heidi wants to play her vote correctly, like in any case, they're gonna win. And if she's gonna put the vote on Jam Jam, like they can split around it regardless. She literally has to say where the vote is going. They're not like, who would Heidi try to split on? And now I need to try and split the other way. Like, yeah. They know
that's the wild thing is that, let's say Matt gets his bag, he pulls out an idol, they very clearly reconvene. They decide, okay, we're splitting votes. Then Heidi forces Lauren to vote for Jam Jam. And Lauren's like, okay, I guess we're still splitting votes. It's still in Matt's interest to use his shot in the dark and not actually cast a vote.
Yeah, 100%. I completely agree. But this is why it's actually much less. This is why I think it's more interesting and less powerful than a vote steal. Because if you just steal a vote, it's like obviously you can't split on that. Like that person like has full secret control of that. But with just a zombie vote, especially going wrong, now like the fact that they can work around it.
You have to still split the votes because once Matt pulls out the idol, Jam Jam will play his shot in the dark, presumably. And, you know, if Jam Jam hits his shot, you know, or Matt, like you have to hope that at least one of them isn't getting something, right? And so it's better to split your votes because if Jam Jam thinks that the votes might come on him because Matt has an idol and he plays his shot in the dark and you put the votes on Jam Jam, but Matt never had an idol in the first place, then now you screwed yourself over for no reason. So yeah, you kind of have to then go split votes. So it
Yeah,
might
no,
all it might have done is force
Yeah.
Lauren to play her extra vote.
I think if you're really scared about an idol, like a big thing that they mentioned Soko a lot, and then they also mentioned like he doesn't even have his bag. Like that's that vulnerability is something they exploit as they should. I think that like if they're scared Matt could really have an idol, then I think that there's a very good chance that Lauren is playing her extra vote here to properly split a vote out of the fear of it, out of maybe wanting to target Matt over Jam Jam and really weaken Soko and like really using it to be able to do that. And as you're saying, out of the fear of an idol and a shot in the dark both hitting. Well, one shot in the dark hitting. An idol in the shot in the dark could still hit, but that would be really unfortunate. So I think they can probably go on those odds of just splitting 2-2.
Now I will say this: I think that if Matt has the bag at camp, that's a different story because he can go to Ratu privately with his idol and be like, "Listen, I've got this idol. I really want to work with you guys though. I'm telling you, I'm going after Danny." Like with the idol on top of the argument, there's a world where it could make sense that they decide,
Yeah, I
okay,
definitely think so.
we don't want to piss off Matt for no reason. If in the event he's telling the truth and he has an idol and he plays it and now we voted for him, why don't we just put votes on Jam Jam while telling Jam Jam it's Matt? And then if Jam Jam, whatever, then we're fine. Or maybe even one vote on Matt just in case, and then the rest on Jam Jam, and then we'll try to work with Matt, whatever it might be. I think that gives him more of a chance than the public kind of like getting the bag passed to him, because I think at that point it's too late for him to make that kind of play.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's been underestimated. I think it's been underreported how important the bag is. I think that's why the principle also, and from a TV perspective, but like in how much it really screwed over Matt, it really is important. If you're worried about a shot in the dark, like even if you aren't Soko v lone wolf, and they are obviously incentivized to be against Soko, but the fact that Lauren even says like he doesn't have his bag, he doesn't even have the shot in the dark, which is like something you could fear for. Like, of course, put majority votes on him. Like, he's like the biggest, most wide open target, who also is the thing weakening Soko. Like, those are the two reasons, and I don't feel like either of them are Matt's fault. And I think both are like production's really heavy hands. So in this way, without the bag, he has to be the target. In a world where he has the bag, and the worst case scenario for them is splitting on an idol and a shot in the dark hitting, Jam Jam shot in the dark and Matt's idol being real, I think the chances of that are very, very small, and they could be comfortable on a 2-2 split. And at the fact that Heidi isn't properly sealing a vote and has to vocalize it, they can just move the split around to what that would be, because she uses that advantage poorly. But I actually meant when I asked the question several minutes ago, like, who in the other group do you think would, like, if you have to put your money down on the winning group, on who would have gone home, like, do you think that the Danny blind side comes off? Or I guess it's hard to know, but it would have been interesting. I really feel like it would have been interesting.
Yeah,
I mean, would have been interesting. Like, we were setting up to an interesting vote before. I think
it's Danny. I think it's Danny. If he plays his idol, then it's probably Kane. I guess I would assume it's Carson, Carolyn, Kane come together. I don't see why they wouldn't. With that being a solid 3, with Franny already thinking of taking a shot at Danny, Franny probably sides with them, but Danny probably thinks that he has Carson, Franny, and Carolyn all against Kane. He probably thinks it's all 5 against Kane, but secretly Franny, Carson, and Carolyn are working with Kane to take out Danny. And then if Danny figures out he needs to play the idol, it probably falls on Kane. And if he doesn't, then he gets blindsided with an idol.
Yeah, and I think some of that is interesting for Franny. It's a big move. Some of it's unfortunate, but nothing is like, Kane seemed like a workable option as an example. But the idol's gone, and none of that's as bad as Matt going. Like, she's immune. This seems like an interesting, dicey kind of complex situation, but not for her, because at least she's immune. And however it plays out, it's better than Matt. I do think it's interesting because even Brandon says he's like not super mad that I lost that challenge, because at the end of the day, when by fully winning, you are winning like a lack of power, like the safety without power aspect when you already have safety. I think it's interesting. Like, it doesn't necessarily mean you should always lose, because it comes down to like the dynamics in each tribe, obviously, like that being a very specific thing, and it did work out really, really well for Brandon. But I just think that that's like an interesting game design. It's like you actually win possibly a disadvantage in losing that power. So that's interesting.
And for all of that prediction I just made, what would probably happen, because this has been my experience with watching this season.
Oh yeah, and then also someone would have the key thing, by the way.
Is that it would turn out that Danny and Kane are actually best friends, and they've been working together for a little while, and so they actually both really hate Carson, and they want to take Carson out, but turns out that Carolyn actually has an in with Heidi, and so that's my experience watching this season.
Actually, it was going to go from an interesting, possibly big group Danny blindside. That's what we're hearing, Danny versus Lauren. Okay. Then they go to this group and they luck out. Franny throws a challenge. The much more interesting group is going to tribal council. Let's do this. Oh my God, it's going to be the Danny blindside. Anyway, we're going to get him. Franny's going to flip. She's going to make a real move. We're going to take out a big dog with an idol. Fascinating stuff. Oh no, because they get to tribal council and Brandon found the key. Brandon's going to put his vote onto Danny, and Danny's going to think, oh, I don't like that. I'm just going to play my idol to be safe. I don't know who's going to vote for me, but I know I already got one vote. It's a small tribe. Let me just do it. And then the perfect blindside actually got prevented, and actually just like someone like Kane goes home. That's probably
I forgot about the twist. Yeah, you're totally right.
That would, maybe, oh, well, now I know I'm getting a vote. I don't love that. Not a lot of votes here. Maybe I'll just play my idol. Oh, everyone was voting for me. Oh, but now that he says, well, I'm going to play my idol, so they don't. They also work around. We all just vote for Kane. Like, all of that, I think, could be a strong possibility. My head is spinning from just rage and frustration and the heat, I think, maybe. Once we start getting into all the shots in the dark, I think that's when it gets really confusing, because it's a finicky mechanism of... But yeah, I think that the big takeaway is that Matt Blankenship has that bag. We've all been underestimating that was really powerful. What else is there? We haven't done the Chissy or the Stockwatch. Was there more here?
Let's do some Stockwatch, and then
then we can,
that will probably shake out any remaining bits and pieces.
Yes. Yeah. Great.
All right. So this is, of course, the portion of the podcast, if you listen to my podcast, the Stockwatch, where we rate the players from 1 to 10 based on how well we think they are doing in the game, which is obviously based on incomplete information. But it's a fun exercise to try to get a sense of what we think. 1 being the worst, 10 being the best. When it comes to rating players that were voted out, we kind of ignore the fact that they were voted out to a degree and try to just rate them based on their gameplay in this particular episode. Regardless of the fact that they were voted out, it's usually still pretty bad, because whatever they did end up with them getting voted out. So it's probably not great.
No, sometimes it's not their fault. Matt is getting a high rating today.
And sometimes they get high ratings.
Yeah.
And so that's what we're gonna do. And if you're watching the video version of this podcast, because I have dragged Shannon into the video world, then you can see their faces on the screen. Just like that.
Matt's black and white.
Matt's black and white, and they're divided into their groups as well. So the top group was the vulnerable group, and the bottom group was immune. So let's kick off. Let's start with Matt, who was voted out. Definitely, I think a big part of rating a voted out player is how much of it was their fault. How screwed did they get? And Matt, I think, is definitely up there in terms of getting screwed. I do want to play one clip, though, of perhaps an example of the kind of approach that he would make here.
And if y'all have a different idea, like if somehow like my read of this is wrong and y'all are thinking like we should get Lauren out or something like crazy like that,
I'll be straight up with you. I do not plan on voting Lauren.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense, right? Like, that's just, I get it, you know?
I love that you pulled that clip. I tried to find like the perfect gift to tweet that, and I could not, because I love that he's like, what if we're all like, if we're gonna do something really crazy, like we're just gonna be like cuckoo banana pants and vote out Lauren? And Brandon's like, no. He's like, fair.
Yeah, he's like, I mean, I'm not saying that we should do this, but if by some chance you were thinking about doing something weird, like I don't know, like just random example, like voting Lauren out, then like I mean, I would theoretically, in that certain circumstance, I would theoretically be in on that. If you were, no, we're not going to do that.
No.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't want to do it either, really.
Yeah, that man had no options. Like, come on. He was trying something in nothingness. Like, his legs were tied and he was trying to jump through hoops. Like, that's where it's tough. Like, it's very, very tough.
Perhaps though indicative. I mean, we've certainly seen some awkward scenes from Matt throughout the season.
You're a little fishy, and I've got my big long rod.
Away with words.
They are still dating,
so
yeah. I don't want to say more on that.
This is so tough because I feel like I barely saw gameplay from Matt. Like, what is he supposed to do there? It seems, especially from the secret scenes, that he tried to tell them about how he was taking a shot at Danny, and they just didn't believe him.
Care enough. Everyone will take a shot at Danny. You know, like Jam will do that too.
Yeah, so will Jam. Like,
and maybe you won't. You know, like if you're Soka, then, and we're just gonna like, are we gonna like hope for the best that Soka split, or are we just gonna split them ourselves? Like, we have the control to do that now. Why would we rely on you doing that later, even if you will? Like, you know, why would we put it in your hands to decide that timing?
To be clear, I would make the same move
Yeah.
again, without having any of the relationships, just looking at it strategically, which is kind of what they had to do. If I'm Lauren, Brennan, and Jamie, I'm voting out Matt. I don't care if he's saying he's going to go against Danny.
Yeah.
I don't trust that. Does
Mhm.
Danny know about it? Because if Danny doesn't know about it, that means that Matt has the option of going against Danny
I mean, they
or
could
going
use a
back
lot of
to
this
Danny if he
information.
wants to. And they can
Yeah.
try to use the information, but does Danny believe them, right?
Yeah.
And now they're in that tricky position when they can just take Matt out, say, Jam, we want to work with Tika, and just go in Tika's direction. Now, of course, by doing that, they're giving Tika the advantage. But you know, it's one way or another. I would rather give Tika the advantage than all of Soka if Matt isn't actually against Danny, or even just changes his mind and decides he needs to work with Danny for a little bit longer. So yeah, I'm taking Matt out every time over Jam. And
Yeah.
there's basically not a lot he can say unless I already have like a great relationship with him that I feel like I can utilize. If my relationships are basically the same between Jam and Matt, then I am voting Matt out every time.
Yeah, I mean, like, Matt could also, like, they do have a lot of information at that point that they could try and use between Matt and Danny, but Matt could always just say to Danny, and he'd be lying, but he could be like, I literally was saying that because I was on death row. Like, I
Yep.
would say anything. And yeah, I don't think it's enough, especially because they're not in the position where they need to come back and use it. Like, they could just split it now themselves.
He can also say, like, yeah, you know what? I was thinking that at the time, but guess what? We need each other right now because
And
they've
that's
got
also
numbers.
true. That's
Exactly.
actually like, that's actually also true. Like, at the point where that was so scary, even like say that like he did want to take out Danny, and then Heidi helps Matt to get him through. I think that is actually what happens. You know, like, I think it's like, wow, Ratu are really going to come for me. I maybe don't like, now let's like kind of like unify in our defensiveness. So like at the point where this has possibly been a war, even if he's spared or he wins in some way, like through Heidi, there's every chance that it's like, actually, we have been Soka and being targeted for us being Soka. Maybe we actually should like rely on that Soka strength and actually like make use of that for a win. And I think that could definitely happen. So, you know, why should they not? In terms of like empowering Tika, I don't think that the group sees Tika as like a core three. Like, Carson has spoken a lot about it being quite hidden, and I think that has worked because we hear a lot of like, the only one who'd be upset that Jam goes is Carolyn. Like, we actually never hear about Carson, so I don't know that they understand like the coalition that's kind of being formed there with Kane as well. So I don't think they really think they're empowering a group. If anything, like, they may be pulling over a Jam with a Carolyn. Like, there's a good amount, actually, like a really comfortable amount of like numbers to help without it being like daunting.
Yep.
And that might be to their demise, and that's probably a credit to Carson and that like Tika Kane little coalition that's happening. But yeah, like in every possible way, they're incentivized to weaken this group, take out like a social threat in Matt. Matt and Jam are both threatening in their own way. Try pull over Jam, try pull over Carolyn with it. It's like a very comfortable spot, I think. I think that Matt, you know, to get to the ratings of it, like, he seemed like he would have been a really formidable player to me. He seemed like we only hear about how everyone loves him, how he's that social. He seems like a very savvy player. I like a lot of what I saw from him last week. I think there was a lot of strength in the way that he was pushing the vote. I just think for me, he never got the chance to play. And in ways that, again, the show tried to paint as like really stupid. Like, you lost 2 of your votes. It was like he had to lose the first one at that point. I always thought in for a penny, in for a pound, and then he happened to lose 2. You know, and like, there are other people who made a similar decision, got an advantage. Like, he gets unlucky there. Falling for the fake idol. How could he not? Then immediately, like, we hear like he's onto it, is making decisions with that in mind. Josh and then Danny, with like, I think like really credible information and logic. Does everything he needs to do here. Throws Danny under the bus. Like, he cannot help that he's the only Soker on the tribe. So I think he got like royally screwed. I mean, the only thing you could say is how much he made himself a threat with Franny. I think that's like the biggest knock against his game with meaning that he did. And like, I don't know, they were in love, and that was an emotional thing made out of like humanity that has translated into, again, a long-term relationship. That was like the suboptimal move. Like Franny in the challenge, understandable but suboptimal. And I think that's like the one strategic knock I can give against his entire game. And I don't blame him at all for going home. And I don't think there was anything he could do. I don't think there's any out Brandon.
Yeah, I'm with you for the most part here. I think that there are little minor things I could nitpick, but as I said, like there's always going to be little minor things that I can nitpick. And on top of that,
that's what the
when
whole
it comes
podcast
like
is. Yeah.
right, and I'd feel a
Hopefully.
lot more comfortable doing that on Big Brother than I would Survivor, because the little things that I could nitpick, for all I know, are not even real. So, that said, in this episode in particular, it wasn't like I saw anything like that was super positive that Matt did either. Like, he didn't do anything
I
wrong,
disagree.
but I don't feel like he was like oh, you really like, you know, crushed this or did this really well necessarily. But tell me why I'm
I
wrong.
disagree because the
Uh-oh. It's I think the internet disagrees.
oh, I'm back. I was
There
like,
you
too
are.
much ranting. Please make it end. No, so I don't know where I disagree that I think that was good here. They start off the episode with actual meaning, actual strategic meaning. That like these super fans know how it works. Murgatory constricted these tiny tribes, and we're gonna get a real vote until we probably split up next week. Let's actually make it count. Like the amount of gameplay that was happening, again, trinket based, but like freeing. Like it's sad to me how much they like wanted to play before this all happened. And then for Matt, in that what we see is he's pushing a Danny vote. That would have been epic. That looks
But
like
what
it
but
might have.
my problem with it, from my perspective at least, is that I have no idea if it would have worked or who he
Okay.
had or anything.
Yep. I mean, and we see in conversations with like Carson, Kane, like we see kind of these like swing votes possibly being brought over. We see these conversations. The first thing that's good is like we get confirmation that he was always onto the fake idol, and I think that's a big credit to him. And like, I mean, look,
Fair.
the toothpaste was out of the tube when Ratu found it all together, and it was different to production thought, which they will see as a failure, and I see maybe as good luck, and that's the difference. But he sees that he's pushing a vote, and the other vote is Lauren. Either way, it seems like he's kind of like well positioned with good social relationships where it's not going to be on him, and there are like he's got his hands in both interesting pies on both kind of ends of this like strategic spectrum, and I think that was actually really good. Then he does everything he can after that, and we see like literally everything you could possibly ask of him to do. So for me, it's actually actively positive, as we'll kind of maybe see in the Chizzy. I don't think it's neutral. I think he did actually better than almost anyone in this episode with like actual active agency before it was ruined and even after it was.
I think you make a decent case there. I just for me it's tough because it's like, you know, we saw him, you know, trying to get Danny out, but like who, like with what numbers is my question, right? Like clearly not with Ratu, right? They were not with him. They didn't even believe that he was going to
Well,
do
at
it.
that point they might be. Like they're trying to weaken Soka.
Right,
Like,
but
at the
what I'm
point
saying is
where-
like at that point he hadn't approached Ratu about it.
well,
And didn't
so
have
it's
them
in
on
11
board.
people. He's got like Carson,
Well,
Kane with
that's the question. Does he actually have Carson and Tika?
Yeah, and we don't know. And like they should want to do that. That seems like a great move. Like if Soko are gonna like cut into themselves, take out a huge threat with an idol, they're getting information here that Danny has the idol. That's good information that Matt is giving them. Matt, Franny, Carson, Kane, Jam, Carolyn. That's 6. And now like the people who are out, like actually that's the Nerd Alliance that I always wanted. And I don't think it's ever going to happen. I just badly wanted to know. Now Matt's gone. Anyway, yeah, I think and those are the people we see him speaking to. It would have been fun to watch.
We do see him speaking to them. So Carson tells us in the episode, I'm in the middle, and Tika is deciding who wins the war between Soka and Ratu. But
it actually wasn't really, because Soka and Ratu, it feels like could have both been on the outs of that. Like in this vote, like those 6 are voting maybe for Danny, possible, and then like you know, fracturing on their own terms, while Danny is anyway voting like for Lauren and with Heidi, and they're doing, and then like the Ratu 3 who end up in the best position, or maybe like they're not voting for Danny, but they're on the outs too. Again, this is all such massive fan fiction. But
well, that's part of why, like, I think if I'm Carson, I'm probably going to side with Danny to vote out Lauren first to
that's true.
Sort of precipitate this war between Soka and Ratu, knowing that I have the vent and the Death Star in Matt and Franny for Soka. And then, you know, I'd pull that card when I got to it. Assuming it stayed there, I'd probably go 1 vote on Lauren, and then you don't want to wait too long. And again, you know, maybe Matt and Danny reconnect, and that would be dangerous. But that's probably where I would go, especially the accelerated pace of the game. I would probably hit there first. But yeah, it's I do hear you though. It's for me, I like to have a better view of whether it was actually succeeding. But And then
But
also
can I
like,
just
okay,
say as well that even
Mhm.
if that is where Carson goes with, like, that's also fine for Matt and
yeah,
Franny.
it is.
Like, especially that, like, yes, like, and because Matt's also fine with doing, like, with taking out Lauren. So it's like, let's do that. And not be like, because then, then like I can use Soko against each other. Like, you don't have to say it like that, but it's like, let's like get out both threats. Like, let's work together to do both of these things. And it actually does work for each of us. And you can try and use Danny further on, like use him now and then we'll take him out later. Yeah, I think that works all around. And maybe that is why that would happen, because it seems like there's like a kind of mutual incentive there. But I don't think that's bad for Matt. And I think he's in the position where he has those options and those working relationships, and he's given enough information where people might want to work with him on that. So I still think that's a positive thing for him. I think that's positive for all of those people who are having those conversations. Kane, Carson, Matt, Franny, Jam and Carolyn would be brought in, it seems like, with Carson. Like, I think that's a good spot wherever they go with it. And I think they could have achieved objectives over the next couple of rounds with it, assuming there wasn't, 15 twists that would have prevented that exact thing happening.
And see, this is where I would have loved to know what Matt's full plan was beyond just the Danny vote. Like, did he want to work with Carson and Tika? Did he also have the misconception that Carson was not super tight with Tika, and that's why we see him approaching Carson and Kane and not Carolyn and Jam Jam? And so he thinks he's pulling in Carson and Kane, but surprise, surprise, Carson also has Jam Jam and Carolyn. And where does that kind of leave Matt in his end game? Like, there's just, this is like the interesting stuff for me about like knowing people's plans ahead of the immediate thing in front of them helps contextualize why they're making the moves they are, and it paints this sort of intricate picture of the strategy and the relationships and how they all interact. And that's, again, just, it's what I'm missing, and it makes me feel like, I see what Matt was trying to do in the next move, but like, where does that put him in the long-term position? I have no idea. And I barely got to see Matt play, so I have no idea if I would even like know that, like, okay, well, I have a lot of faith in Matt as a player because I've seen him make a bunch of moves that were good. It's like, I don't think he even voted like once, or like, this is the first time he voted.
This was the first time, yeah. And he didn't want to. He wanted a shot in the dark. He was forced to vote, actually, which is, yeah. So there was two forced votes happening here in different ways. I think for Matt, I think he said he was quite proud of how the winning group were like so upset, except for Carolyn and her facial expressions about it being Jam Jam, but like, and Carson's obviously hiding his relationship to Jam Jam, but like, they were upset. Even Danny, it seemed that this was going to be Matt. And so he's like, those were my relationships. So in a way where they are maybe, and he does seem amenable to Lauren. Like, I don't think the Danny plan was on. He says in exits, like, that wasn't necessarily the next thing, but like, we're having those conversations in a world where they are cutting into Ratu, taking out a power player like Lauren, her extra vote, taking out like a core person in that, and then he has plans and other relationships. I think he's in a good spot. Is there enough evidence that this was all going to work and go through? Like, clearly not. We get literally 5 minutes of the organic strategizing at the beginning of the episode, and that's true of everyone, but I think there's enough evidence there to show that he was in a good spot, to show that he had good relationships, had good social currency to work through, plans for the near future, and you can't plan more than that. Clearly, you can't even plan for that. You can't even plan past the challenge. So I think that was good. And I think as well, he did everything he needed to and possibly could have, other than bringing his bag, too meaningless, to the challenge. So past the challenge, I also think it was good. So
there's one tangible thing that I can point to, which is that Heidi does ostensibly try to save Matt here, which is, I think, an indication that despite the fact that Matt was trying to plot Danny's elimination, Danny's number one ally, Heidi, did try to save him to disastrous effect for her own game. So I think we can give,
then that's a good point.
Matt some credit for that. Obviously, Franny was a big push there as well, but clearly that was, they were operating well enough under the radar. We're not ratted out. So I can definitely give him that. I think you make a decent case for a potential like sort of path for Matt to go with the Danny plan. I'd be willing to go to like a 6 for Matt here, just a bit above neutral.
Yeah, I think Heidi was trying to save him. I think that's where I land. I think that it was so bad that there is an argument that it's not true, but I think a lot of that is projecting and assuming based on how badly it was played and other things, like she must be close to Lauren when we just don't know that. I think she was trying to save him. I think that it's Occam's razor. It was just terrible. I was thinking a 6, and you know what? I'm like even higher on it in talking about him, so I'm just gonna give him a 7. I know he got voted out. I don't know how high that usually is for people who get voted out. If it's usually like not necessarily.
It's pretty high, but I don't think it's unheard of.
Okay.
You know?
Yeah.
Especially
I
for
think,
a level of screwed that he was. Like, I think that's
yeah,
perfectly reasonable.
He got screwed. I'm giving him a 7.
All right. Okay. Well, usually how I like to do this, just to loosely structure it, is that we'll just talk about them in their groups and then kind of talk about them in order of, Matt out first. But now I'll go with the lowest person in this group that was vulnerable. And I guess the person I would rate as the lowest in this group, it's kind of tough, actually.
Really hard.
Yeah.
I kind of feel like I know where you want to go, and I disagree. I disagree when you haven't even said anything. Like,
well,
I mean, it's
okay.
Ratu and Jam Jam. Like, there's not like I can't really differentiate the 3. So
let me just talk through it a little bit. So, Jam Jam was obviously the alternate, the backup vote here, or the person who could have been voted out, but he's not going to be in that spot anymore moving forward. And now that the war has been initiated between Sokka and Ratu, Jam Jam should be nice and safe and toasty with Tika. So I'm not really that concerned for him. I think he's out of the water now. And so I don't think we need to rate him that low. And he didn't really do anything wrong. He also kind of got screwed, just like Matt, and just didn't get voted for here. So I wouldn't have him low. Then we've got Lauren, Brandon, and Jamie. Lauren with 2 votes. I've been putting high because she has 2 votes, but I knew nothing else about her game. Now, the fact that she has 2 votes seems to be putting a target on her. We know that there's going to be some heat on her next episode. So I'm actually tempted to put Lauren as the lowest person here, just because of the target on her back. She has that extra vote, but I don't know if that's going to be enough to keep her around.
No, that's not.
So yeah, I think Lauren would be next for me.
Yeah. Where I sit with it is like Jam Jam keeps getting put into tough spots where, like, yes, he's another option, but just because of circumstance, and if anything, it's more impressive. He didn't get himself out of this again. That's not on him, but like to see his powers come through, I think is really impressive. For Jam Jam, for me, I don't know who like for Jam, like I'm high on Jam Jam because I feel like just like him coming back from that tribal council where he was getting votes, and the way he's making people laugh. Like, I think it's rare to see, like, often we say it's hard to see the social game through the screen, but with Jam Jam, it doesn't need to be said. Like, it's shown, not told, because he's that good. Like, he's so likable, and it's such a good social game. And yeah, he's just a delight. So I'm really high on, like, his capacity as a player. And I think any of his bad spot has been just being, like, constricted at Tika by himself and being in these vulnerable positions while someone like Carolyn has an idol and has been safe. I don't think that's his fault. I think he's done well with it, as well as can be. And also, I don't think it's the difference maker here. But yeah, I think that, like, for Brandon, Jamie, and Lauren, they are, like, they're put in this really good position is the first thing. They do well with it. They don't hide it. But I don't know how much I can put on them for that. And now going forward, I don't think they should be in a great spot. I think that they were kind of being looked at to be targeted. I think there's so much incentive for Soku and Tika to work together, but if anything, Heidi just screwed that up. But that's not their doing. I think they're in a better spot than they should be. So I'm a little bit confused about where to go with them, because I think that it's better than it should be, but I don't put a lot of that on them specifically. So I actually, across the board, I'll just say what I did. I gave Brandon, Jamie, and Lauren all 6s because I feel like it's fine and actually quite positive, but I don't ascribe that much agency to them achieving it. And then Jam Jam, I gave a 7 because I'm just really impressed with him. Like, I know, like, you like somewhat look at it and from an episodic fashion. I think going forward as well, he has options now and outs, and I can't imagine who would be looking at him. And hopefully he's out of the position where he's going to be in, like, constricted votes where you are looking at, like, small outs, which has been, like, the worst thing that could have possibly happened to him through his entire game. If he has a little bit of room and space, he will maximize on that because he's that type of player. So that's where I had all of them and why.
I think that's a pretty good order. I think that I would agree overall. I think I would have Lauren just a tad lower than Jamie and Brandon because we actively heard her name as a target.
Yes. Yeah. Fair about Lauren and the target. I actually have Jamie on a 5.
That Jamie at a 5. Okay.
Just because she, like, again read the wrong thing in the secret scene.
Yeah.
That like it's the capacity as a player for me where I'm just like, are they just showing every time she's wrong, or is she wrong all the time and sometimes we see it?
Well, to be fair, it wasn't in the episode. So
Yeah,
but she is
even
she
wrong
is
in the
in the
secret scene,
episode.
Jamie. Yeah.
She is in the episode saying,
I am the most valuable person that anybody could ever interact with.
Yeah.
which is not meant to be positive, I don't think.
I don't think. I mean, look, it turned out to be important here because Jamie could have been the alpha Matt. Like, if anything, we saw that negative social interaction between them where Matt, and again, like, to his discredit, doesn't give her like the yes, I'm with you pedestal, which he should, and she doesn't like that. So there's a negative social interaction there. But Matt also said in exit interviews that he wasn't trying to work with Jamie because he knew it was bad because she immediately came in lying that they hadn't opened the bird cage and that the first vote was simple, which they already knew wasn't true from Claire on the bench. So she had already put out red flags that didn't help her case with Soka. Then Soka never lose a challenge and she has an idol. But again, is that like, you know, I feel like she was worsening that situation for herself, and we're finding out about that in hindsight. So it's just like the skill level that I'm really concerned about, really. Obviously Lauren's the one targeted more. I would put for Brandon, obviously, is immune. So I guess you give a little bit to that. Lauren's targeted, but Jamie, just on like some of the concerning reads and some of those, you know, moves that we're finding out about in hindsight, I would put Lauren above Jamie for me. I had Jamie at a 5 actually.
I think I would give Jamie and Lauren both 5s. I think that I honestly I would be lower on Jamie just based on just where she seems to be, but after Gabler, like I'm not gonna take anything for granted.
We can't do that. You can't change your whole mind. You can't change every way we look at things due to Gabler. We just have to just like see that as an anomaly and keep pushing on.
Why is she so present in the episodes? It's weird.
Because it's funny.
Win the challenge. Bling. Get your buff back. Bling. Win immunity. Ring, ring, ring. It's all happening.
Why is she present? It's funny when someone's wrong all the time and it's going to be building to a big fall. That's what it is.
When she wins, there's going to be so many people like, you idiot. It was right in front of you the whole time. Bring, bring, bring. It's all happening.
Yeah, that's the Ellie Gabler of it, right? Like that's yeah. I hadn't seen it till I listened to you last week, and I'm like, I kind of get it. But I don't agree. I don't co-sign the Gabler thing, so I'm not co-signing the Jamie Lynn thing. Like, yeah. So
well, I'm gonna give Jamie a 5. I'm gonna give Lauren a 5. If you give Lauren a 6, then that'll average her out a bit above Jamie there. And then I'd give Brandon a 6. For the current position. I feel like these 3 might be in trouble, but I don't know for sure, especially with Heidi's move. I feel like Tika might side with them, but who knows? And then I'd also give Jam a 6 here. I think that his position will probably be good moving forward, but I don't have enough confidence in my read on the, structure of the game to know for sure.
You know what it is? When it's so twisty, the players make conservative moves because how could they not? And you make more conservative assessments.
Absolutely.
Because again, we don't know, like we don't,
Well, that's the thing. Like on Big Brother this season, I feel like I've been able to rate fairly aggressively at times, despite not knowing things, because I at least have an awareness of the structure of the game. So like there was a moment where I saw basically nothing from one player and I gave her an 8 because her position was amazing. But I didn't see her actually play to know what she was doing wrong. And so I was like, great positioning. Maybe she's doing something wrong, but who knows? And then she went ahead and ruined her position because of her bad play. But it was like, hey, that's fun. But in Survivor, it's like I'm not aware of how well they're playing, and I'm also not aware of their positioning. So it's like I really have like very little to go off of.
Yeah.
I can guess at their position, but it's usually wrong because they pull out random stuff out of their hat every episode that I wasn't aware of prior to that. All right.
Yeah.
Let's move on to the immune group. And we'll start down at the bottom of the immune group. And I think that for this episode, it's got to be Heidi, right? Just the performance in episode alone, whether or not she's in a bad position.
On her. Like I feel like I had her at a 5, and that feels wrong. Like that feels actually way too high because she screwed up this vote so badly, and I think actually ruined like what could have been a really positive forward position going like if anyone, it's like Ratu in a better spot or Ahsoka in a worse spot, like I feel like that's on her. Like it's the short term issue, and you said it so well. Like in every way, like the worst possible thing she could have done.
Just a colossally bad episode for her.
Yeah, and
on
then
top
going
of
forward,
on top of the bad move, it potentially puts her and her group in a disadvantaged position. And then on top of that, this was also an episode where Danny was being targeted, which is not good for her. She's close to Danny, which her entire structure is flawed to begin with. And means that like as they're in a disadvantaged position, Franny's even more likely to jump ship if they are in trouble. And even if they aren't in trouble, Franny is likely to jump ship, which means being not in trouble means they still have some trouble. And individually, her decision making was very poor here. And on top of that, I do agree with you that the just colossal failure of this move in a very public way puts her in a very rough spot for the jury if she makes it there. You know what I mean?
So it could have been the opposite.
Yeah.
A lot to gain that was lost. I mean, yeah, like 99% she just screwed up so royally that it was horrible here. And in the future, small percent, she had the wrong intention on what her group should be, and then played that out badly in and of itself. As you're saying, the positioning is not great. Like in terms of the Stockwatch, what am I giving her points for? Like, how is this not a 1? Like, you tell me.
I mean, she hasn't she's not like for sure lost.
Yeah, she's not like a huge target. Yeah,
there's still some time left, and she probably isn't going to get voted out soon. So that's why I would go with a 2 personally. I feel like big concrete reasons to drop her low in this episode, where normally I don't get a lot of concrete reasons. It doesn't mean that like her positioning is strictly a 2. Her positioning is probably more like a 3 or a 4. But the decisions that she made and the downward momentum of this episode, drops her down to a 2 for me.
And it's so loud. It's so public. It was so bad. Like producers set you up. Like that's the problem. Producers are like, do the thing, and she didn't. And I don't even credit people when they do because it's so obvious, and she still stumbled off the path. So yeah, I think a 2. That feels right. I agree with you.
All right. Next up, I feel like I'm not going to go Kane because I think that there's not really a lot of reason to target him anymore, but I said that of Josh, so who knows?
I feel like the next one's really obvious to me.
I think it has to be Danny or Franny.
It's
Franny
Danny.
lost Matt, but I think like this was a bad episode for Franny. It's not going to be a good rating for her, but at least the bleeding probably stops here. There's not a lot of reason to target Franny moving forward. Whereas Danny, I think could be a target. I think Matt's been talking about him having an idol. He started some momentum against Danny, and Heidi just made this move that obviously she's with Danny, so Danny's going to take some heat for it, I would imagine. So I think I would agree that Danny would be next on the list. You know, he didn't really seem to do anything wrong himself in this episode. More like his past actions kind of caught up to him. I actually said back in when he made that fake idol, I was like, I don't understand the point of this. It only serves as a way for you for like bad things to happen to you if you ever get caught. And here we are. He got caught and got targeted for it. And the fact that he did it was the very thing that exposed that he was the one that had it. Whereas, you know, he I think would have been finally under the radar otherwise. I'm not going to rate him too low because I already rated him low for that move when it happened, or I detracted some points from him when that happened. But I do think that that's coming back to haunt him. I think the Heidi thing is bad. I think that losing Matt here, you know, is theoretically bad, but maybe actually kind of a good thing considering Matt was kind of trying to come for him. He does still have the idol, and he might have a better idea that he needs to play it than he would have if Matt had been in the game orchestrating a secret blindside. So it's not like all terrible for Danny, but it's definitely not nearly as good as it was heading into this episode. So I'm going to go having the idol alone. I'm going to keep him at a 5 because he still has plenty of game to play and he didn't really do anything wrong in this episode himself. So that's where I'm going to go.
Yeah, I'm gonna give him a 5 too. I was really high on the fake idol planting to the point where I was like, producers, he's doing exactly what production want. I was like, well, I can't give him credit because he's just doing the thing. But I also thought that he did it well and it was fine. But I didn't actually feel like how badly this would come back to bite him when it became obvious. And like, yeah, the second Ratu found it together, everything was different in a way that I didn't as much expect, in production definitely didn't expect. The way that it was being passed on benches ages ago is clearly something that they, I don't think, liked. They started moving the benches apart, and they never showed that as like a flashback to like Claire telling Matthew and how that, because that's what happened. Like that's how he knew. They could only show it now to simplify the story that he only is finding out now, which was a really truncated version of that story for Matt. But yeah, like you were totally right on it. Rob was right. Just because you could doesn't mean that you should. It's come back now to hurt him. He's given up some of his own secrecy in a really small tribe. Like for a while they thought it was Josh, but now that that's gone, like Matt said, only really Danny and Josh were looking as much. Like it could anyway only be Danny and Heidi once Josh is gone. So he gave up his own secrecy to do like the cool fun thing to kind of screw over Matt, and it did not pan out that way. So I think like that was, I gave Chissy points for that. Like I think that you know, a lot of that is so much worse than I thought. That's not great. Some things here I think do work out for him. Like again, this should be pretty good for Soka, but it's not because of Heidi. But that's not on here. Like for a while, it's like, okay, you were being targeted. Oh, now maybe you'll come together as a group in this like defensive way. Oh no, now like, maybe you won't have those swing votes because your prime ally Heidi did, to be fair, the opposite of what he said to do. He was the one being like, target Lauren, and she really should have listened to that. So I feel like that screws him over in not a great way. But I do think he gets some good stuff, which is to see a shot at Soka across the bow. Not on him because it can't be, but to him. Let's be honest. Like
Soka's been weakened, and he lost a liability.
Yeah, but he lost a liability. Soka's been weakened, but also he's seen that people are wary of Soka and him by association. Now he's more on alert to play his idol. There's a ton of information out there. Like Matt had to go out and like really give information. He was already doing it, but like it became even more so once he was like in that, you know, panicky spot. He could always hear something. I think that like that being out there is good because like he should have his alarm up now. Anyway, just seeing the fact that Ratu went for Matt here and targeted him and had that as a priority. So the fact that that was laid out for him at Tribal Council, I think that awareness now is good for him. He does still have the idol to do that with, but the fact that he's being targeted and that some of those mistakes in the past that I hadn't been reading came to fruition here. And it could have been him in a different world where he's not immune, maybe twice over, maybe. That's not great. So I think like pros and cons, like some stability in like the strength of the idol, in some awareness, in possibly Soka just like retreating and maybe trying to pull over those allies that Heidi has possibly alienated. Some of that is good, better than it should have been. But yeah, being a target, possibly losing some of those numbers, that isn't good. So I think it kind of rounds out to about a 5, if that all makes sense.
It does. It does. Next, I would put Franny also at a 5 here. Again, bad that she loses Matt, but in a way, it does free her up. She should now be able to operate as a free agent. And Franny is one of the players that I would have a little bit of faith in to be able to play in this situation. I feel like her experience on Soka, what we heard was that people really liked Franny and that they were a little less high on Matt. But they always liked Franny and wanted to work with Franny. The fact that she was able to get back in with Danny and Heidi alongside Matt over Josh, I think is something that we can look at for that is a positive for her game. I think that she will recognize where she needs to go. And basically everyone is going to be like open applications for numbers right now. And she is probably the prime number to take in because she just lost her number 1. So she should have a plethora of options. But still, she is now solo in the game and will have to do a lot of building to get to any kind of like solid end game. So not a great position to start from, but she's got lots of options.
Yeah, I think that I co-sign that. It wasn't a good episode for her, like, you know, more from the episodic standpoint, like in terms of
the mistakes made too as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's not,
she did
that's
make
not
more
great.
Mistakes than Danny, but I think she's in a better spot moving forward.
Yes. She's 100%. I mean, and like, and in terms of the mistakes, like Danny's the one being like, take out Lauren. She's the one being like, take out Jam Jam. She has the wrong read on that, but at least she's not the one playing the advantage on that read after a tribal council, which was basically like theater of like, let me do like sock puppets of what the dynamics are right now. So, you know, she didn't have the right read on it. Had it been in her hands, I think it would have been used right, despite coming from initially the wrong read. So I hope, really. So that's not great. Obviously, the challenge throwing, we don't like that. And I think it's much better for her to have Matt in the game. I think losing him is a loss to her personally, clearly, and also strategically. But I still think there are options. I still think her relationships have been good, as you said. So yeah, I think it also rounds out to a 5. And no one's targeting her now, right? Like that would be pointless.
And to your point as well, that was a big win. And she does strike me as the kind of player that if she did manage to get to the end, she's got a good case. And she's she's continuing to build a good case. So good stuff there.
Yeah.
Next I would put Kane. And honestly, I think I have to also give Kane a 5. I feel like his position is fine, probably, but I don't know enough about it. Like, is he actually with Carson now, or is he still kind of dangling? I'm not sure. And what did we really see of Kane in this episode? Almost nothing. And he just doesn't seem to have a lot of social connection. He's not like in anything yet. You know, the only reason I have him above Franny is because Franny lost Matt. She made some mistakes. But otherwise, I think I'm at a 5 for Kane.
I think we disagree on Kane in general. Like last week I was listening to you. You were low on and like him taking, and like my guest Harry as well was like he could have just said he heard. He didn't have to like throw Carson under the bus. Clearly they both rebound from that okay, to be fair.
Well, is that clear? Was there a secret scene? Because I feel like I still don't see Carson and Kane super linked.
I think that Carson and Kane are both in great positions and with each other. I think that Kane last week, I think we saw him actively like change the vote, the secondary vote off him. We hear it like credited in the reason that he like jam over him, and I agree with you that last week I don't know why like they shouldn't be necessarily scared of that, but I think maybe in the panic and fear of the moment it was like Kane knows it's off, it's done. It wasn't as much logic to be like that's fine, it's whatever, like just keep it. But it seems to actually like have really changed the vote. I think Matt even spoke about in the exits like kind of working with Brandon as they did, and even working with Kane in that. So I think that it was more to his credit maybe than you gave, or I mean that's at least the credit than I'm giving. And that's probably subjective, but I think that this week I'm really high on Kane. Both like I think that we see him in the conversations, like we see him in the conversation where Matt, like every strategic conversation, and maybe that's just what the glimpse we're getting, and that's the lens that's on those specific conversations. But like when Matt is talking about Danny's idol, it's with Brandon, Jam and Kane. Then later when he's talking about Lauren or Franny, it's not Franny, obviously that would be crazy. Lauren or Danny with Franny and Carson and Kane. Later, what I thought was so interesting and so impressive is that Heidi seeks his counsel about the advantage. Why should she do that? Like, what's her relationship to Kane? And obviously, we don't know. We have no idea.
Yeah.
She was like, that's why I really wanted to talk to you. I'm worried about Matt. Like, to really, like, she seems to really kind of invest in that relationship. He's in these conversations. I think he's in with Tika in this middle position as a number that people are picking up. I think hopefully the situation of like easy outs, which he could always be, is done. Hopefully, like we've had these constricted situations, and if he gets space, I think that he's not going to be targeted. I think he's a number to pick up. I think he's in a good position, and I think he's made himself in that good position. I can see the relationship, so I'm high on him in the episode. I'm high on him going forward, and I've been high on him in kind of this merge part of the game.
I mean, I like your vision of Kane. I hope that that's true.
Maybe I'm projecting a bit much. Like, I think maybe it might be somewhere in the middle of like, you're not giving him enough and I'm projecting a little too much. Like, you gave him a 5. I was going to give him a 7. Maybe we should do that, and then he rounds out to a 6. So
yeah, there you go.
But I had him ahead of Carolyn. But so I'm kind of high on Kane. Like, I for me, it's like this is, and we can talk about with the Chissy, the hardest season of the Chissy ever. And same with the ratings. Like, we know so little. There's so little agency. But when I see him in those conversations, when he had possibly been a target, I'm like, I think you're making up ground, because they seem like transparent conversations, like real conversations, genuine ones.
Okay. Well, I was thinking a 7 for Carolyn here. My biggest concern for Carolyn is the lack of social connections outside of Tika and lack of respect that she's getting. I'm concerned for like a jury vote, but like beyond that, nobody seems to be targeting her. I don't know why anybody would anytime soon. She still has that idol, which could be all she needs. We've seen that before to like change the perception of her. I think it's probably an uphill battle, but I think that this is a very good episode for her in general. She obviously not like anything she specifically did, but I think Tika overall is crushing it in this episode. They really benefit from everything that happened. And Carolyn sitting there with an idol, I have her just above Jam Jam. I think Jam Jam has a better chance to win in the end, but Carolyn has a much better chance of getting to the end and has that idol, which could win her the respect that she needs to take home the win. So I would have her just above Jam Jam right now until I see more from like how this dynamic is going to play out. So that's about where I'd have Carolyn.
Yeah. I mean, look at Tika. Like they're at the top of all of these rankings, and I think that speaks to at least the edit that we're getting, if not probably like the actual dynamics. And I think from what we can see, at least, it seems to. Carolyn, I'm between a 6 and a 7. I don't know. I think that like the issue is that she ran Tika, and I'm so impressed with it. And she comes into this week leading the Chissy charts. I think she's a baller player with cool, like great reads. She found an idol. Like I think she's epic. She's amazing. But I feel like I'm really talking like the people in Lego Masters right now. I'm like, she's wicked. Like I feel like it's like seeping into me, like that kind of language. But anyway, she's a wicked player. Not, anyway, how I mean it. But my issue is how she's being perceived in this group, and we haven't seen it play out because she's never been vulnerable from, again, the merge, quote unquote. So hard for me to see like how much of a factor she is to people, like we've never even seen her vote correctly in this. Like she voted for Kane. It was never explained. It was probably fine and intentional. She's probably in the know, or it's chaotic. It's probably meaningless. We never find out. Now she's not voting here. They are like, oh, well, put it on Jam Jam. Only Carolyn will care about it. And like, she'll understand, not really taking her into account. But I also think that I could see her maybe being brought in when this was going to be a big victory. I really thought this was going to be like a big unifying thing, and I thought that would be good for her. And she has power and room to move. I'm just a little bit concerned about, power in an idol and power in this like Tika contingent. I'm concerned about the way she's being perceived, and I don't know yet how that will manifest in the big group. So I think I'm going to give her a 6. But it's an iffy 6. Yeah.
Well, that leaves Carson, who I would put both at the top of this group and the top of the overall game right now. Great episode for Carson, both in the way that things shake out, again, for Tika and Carson, but also just in general, again, like we hear from Carson specifically, and they're giving all this credit to Carson. I'm sure Jam Jam and Carolyn are a part of it at the very least, but I think we've seen very, very good things from Carson, from the swap to where we are. I mean, he was in the swing position on Tika when he was there. He then gets swapped, and it seems like he's in a good position on the swap, even though he shouldn't be. And now heading into the merge, even with Jam Jam and Carolyn potentially in danger, it seemed like Carson was still included in the big group, but he's also now managed to secretly get Jam Jam and Carolyn back together while also not being associated with them too heavily, which puts him and this sort of potentially kind of secret group in the power position that people don't even realize that he has. It's all very good, so good that it almost feels like it's too good, and that the edit is setting him up to be the Jesse of the season or whatever. But it's just very good right now. And he's explaining this to us. Tika will decide who wins the war between Soka and Ratsu. There's nothing to really complain about with Carson. This wasn't like a big flashy big move episode for him, so like I'll reserve those higher ratings for that, but I gave him an 8 this episode. I think he easily seems to be topping the charts right now.
Yeah, I've given him an 8 as well. I swore I wouldn't bring up the draft considering how badly it went for me, but you have Carson, right? Like I feel like that Carson and Jamie though, right? Like that's
well, like listen, we don't need to talk about Jamie or Josh, okay?
Yeah. I mean, look, I had Helen and Claire. Those were like the two. I remember when Helen went in the second episode, I had messaged Claire. I was like, oh, she was going to be my winner pick. Like, thank you for jumping on that grenade for me. And then Claire went next. So that's my team. And Franny, who's still here. So hoping, that comes off. But I feel like Carson, like, we see every positive thing. So it's hard to be like, how much are they telling me this or how much is real? But it feels like he's in a great spot. The thing I was most impressed with in this episode is just how much they're like, the only person who care about Jam Jam is Carolyn. And I was like, that secrecy that he's really working for is very good. We see him in conversations even with Soka, like let alone the fact that he's been Tika, the fact that like he's in with Ratu because he swapped there. And then we also see like the conversations like that Matt's having about like turning against Danny. Like we just see him in every group as an option and never as a target. So I think it's really, really solid, really positive, and I would give him an 8 as well and put him at the top of everyone for sure.
All right. Well, there it is. That's the Stockwatch for this week.
Yes.
Very fun one. Thank you so much, Shannon.
Yes. So we're gonna get to the Chizzy,
Let's do it.
okay, let's take it away, Jacob, take a Weinstein and MC Color first.
1, 2, 3. 1, 1, 1, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. It's getting kind of chizzy. 3, 2, 1.
Yeah, so for people who don't know what the Chizzy is, this is actually for a lot of my own listeners. This is like probably my most frequently asked question because I never explained the Chizzy. Have I explained it on the Stockwatch before, like in full?
You might have.
I never do, and then new listeners come in, they're like, what's the Chizzy? Quick recap. I created the Chizzy, named for Matt Chisholm, the host of Survivor New Zealand. The first season that I covered of Survivor was Survivor New Zealand. I wasn't going to name an award after myself. Named it the Chizzy, and then it was just going to be like a fishy award. And then my first guest, Henry from Australian Survivor, was like, I would give the, the second, the first, second, and third best player these 3, 2, 1 points, because that's how points are decided. Like the umpires decide in Australian sports for like the best and fairest at the end of the year. At every game, they think they decide who has like, the 3 best players in that order. So what we do every episode is we give our points for the best, second, and third best players of the episode. They get 3, 2, and 1 points, and then we compile it, thanks to Randy Newport, into season-long charts. And then the winner wins a Chizzy mug at the end. And it's a good way to kind of track who we think is playing, like at least very actively and often hopefully very well. So so compared to the Stockwatch, it's completely episodic. So you could have a horrible episode last time, and this time it's just literally who played the best today. So it's more, delineated like that. But
Yeah,
did
so
you have
the top 3 won't automatically be Carson, Carolyn, and Jam Jam
they're
as
in
the
3
top
best
3 rated Stockwatch players.
Yeah, exactly. This is, and then there are like probably some interesting things to that. Like if you're like a roller coaster player, like maybe this is like a pitfall with the Chizzy, but like it does reward players who are extremely active. Sometimes they're really bad and really good, but there's no negative points. So it's not about like, oh, your position's fallen. It's like you got 0 points when you were terrible. Maybe you should have got -5, and now you're going to get 3 points. So it really does reward like quite extreme players, but hopefully it does pan out to the way where like you are extremely good. And I do think that the Chizzy winners that we've seen win have been very dominant in a positive way. But like if you look through the charts, like that's probably the biggest like issue with it, because I think about this all the time in terms of like, working it out as a rating system. But I think that it's panned out to some pretty excellent players. And I think we've had so many excellent players in the time I've been covering Survivor that often like, it speaks for itself and pans out in that way. And we've rewarded, like the Tonys of the world. Jesse, like Omar, Ricard, like it was pretty obvious. But yeah, so did you have your points of who you were going to give this episode?
Do we just 1, 2, 3, or do we start at the bottom? What are we doing?
3, 2, 1, but it's up to you. Whatever you think is more interesting, because and it's been really hard. Every week is hard because of production. I will say that.
Well, I would say, it's again maybe not like, because this was a tough one, for sure. Even just like trying to find 3 actively good players.
Yeah, I agree with you. There's not enough agency for the players to reward them as such. We should be we can't give Chizzy points to production because we hate it. And also it's not allowed, but like who are we giving points to? It's tough.
I would still, I guess the least interesting one is my giving the most points to. I would give Carson the top spot here. It's not like he was like doing a ton in this episode, but we do see him actively talking about playing the middle, talking to so many different kinds of people, as you mentioned. And if I'm talking about like the person that I feel best about playing in this episode, it's got to be Carson. But this isn't like, as you said, like a slam dunk where like it would always be Carson. Like if somebody did anything that was just like good in this episode, they probably would have gotten over Carson's position. But for me, it's got to be Carson at the top. Then it gets hard because the people who were safe other than Carson really didn't have a lot to do except for Heidi, Franny, Danny, but they were the bottom on my list because they all made decisions I didn't like or were, put in positions that I didn't like. So, you could maybe make a case for Danny that he advocated for the right cause, but ultimately didn't succeed. His closest ally did not do what he wanted her to do, and instead put them in a bad position. I can't really talk about Kane or Carolyn because I didn't really see them in the episode. So that leaves the vulnerable tribe, where there was basically no gameplay to game. But at least I saw them. So, you know, I could look at Jamie, Lauren, or Brandon, and I could say they made theoretically the right call. You know, Lauren seems to be in a compromised position. Jamie seems to be, you know, not believing Matt and, you know, just not doing great things in general. That leaves Brandon. He won immunity. And he, I think, made the right call in voting out Matt. And I think he was like solid with his allies. I think it was a decent episode for him. We've got Jam Jam, who survived the vote, but otherwise didn't like do a ton in the episode. But we did hear from Heidi that she likes Jam Jam, but ultimately Heidi did try to vote him out. So that kind of negates that. And then we got Matt, who, you know, I looked at as mostly neutral, and you convinced me to go slightly positive on Matt. So I think I would put Brandon number 2 and Matt number 3.
Interesting. Well, that's gonna actually be Brandon's first chili points. So, yeah. So for my points, I agree, really, really hard. I gave 3 points to Jam Jam.
Okay.
Because I just think for the social game, it's honestly mostly for that scene coming back from tribal council when like he voted in terms of the people voting for him, and like the way he just like made people laugh, and like
that
they
is
just love
true.
him.
I forgot about that scene. Yeah.
Yeah, like it was mostly on that because again, I don't think he changed the situation here. I don't think he outpaces Matt. I still think he's perfect through the episode and does everything he needs to do. Like he is very good in obviously saying to Lauren, like giving that information that he does about, again, I don't think it changes anything, but he should be like, you know, Danny's coming for you and everything, and giving that info, which by the way will like really exacerbate the Soka Ratu war that is coming that Heidi really needed to win. I think he does everything he needs to, and it's just like such a good social game, even in like the tribe naming portion, like just like you can see what it's like to be around him, and I just want to reward that. Why does that change anything for your points or no?
It could. I think the biggest detriment for me is Heidi voting him out, or trying to vote him out.
But is that not on her? Like, is that on Jam Jam? Like,
I would, if anything, I would probably. Man, it was honestly so close between Brandon and Matt too. Like I could easily stick Jam Jam in there, take out Brandon, or even take out Matt. But I'll stick with my initial.
Okay, good, because I already wrote it down.
For the sake of variety.
Okay, cool. I'm gonna give 2 points to Matt. I've said it all. Like I think he was doing really well at the beginning of the episode. I think that he was in an interesting spot. I would have liked to see it play out, and then did everything he could have and was just screwed. Like now Matt's gonna get 3 memorial points. So that's a lot. Rob's fact checker will have to tell me the most like memorial points that voted out players got, and it's different in Australian Survivor when like you can go in episode 3, but you were excellent in like the first 2 episodes of the week. But I'd be really interested about like a 1 episode boot and what they get for memorial points, because yeah, I thought he did well. And then I think 1 point to Kane, which I've explained as well, just the conversations he was in after being a possible target last week. I think that improvement is really good. So I've got so many numbers here between the Stockwatch and the charts, but that should mean that now Carson has jumped to the top on 14. I wanted to give an honorable mention to Carson. I think he's doing great. The reason I didn't give him points here is I've already given him so many points for positioning in episodes where there's not a lot of points to give. So I'd be like, 2 for Carson. He's positioned so well. And like, that's fair. But I just feel like if I give him points for positioning every week, not even because I feel like he's furthering his positioning necessarily better, but just because it's really solid every week and there's nothing else going on, then every week he's just going to get like basically 2 points. And I don't think that's like I don't think the game necessitates 2 points a week, basically.
I think that's very fair, yeah.
But like, I've already given points for that. I totally get why you gave him 3 points. So Carson's now on 14, Carolyn's on 12, Jam Jam's now on 12. I hope I'm doing this right. Danny's on 9, Matthew left on 8, Matt left on 7, Kane's now on 7, Claire 5, Heidi 4, Lauren 2, Franny 1, Brandon 2, and Josh left on 1. Sorry about the order. I hope that is all correct. There's numbers everywhere. So that's the Chissy. We've really talked through it, but I actually do have a couple. We got some really great questions, as well as the great questions that were, why God, why? Help me, Paul. So I just want, it's a long podcast, but like also people listening to both our podcasts, they put this together, so it makes sense.
It's a seasonal event. It's
spectacular.
It's a special. It's a very special episode, and luckily we don't do it every time. Yeah,
and that's why it feels like it's so great to catch up. If we did it every week, it would get played out.
Yeah, it would
Okay.
be too much. I would be run into the ground.
It would be, yeah, 100% agree. Perfectly stated. So let's spend the time on the questions because we can, because it's special. It's a,
Mhm.
crossover spectacular. Jacob, this is another hypothetical that I just thought was interesting. Who would have gotten voted out of cast and bet on the wrong team and was in the group that voted at tribal? I mean, I don't know if we have like a stake to claim, and I don't even want to get into the idea of like then Heidi having to use the thing. It's too hard on the hypothetical, but just how much more interesting would that have been? Because then like Carson's there with Jam and
Mhm.
Matt. Maybe then like maybe Heidi actually uses the advantage correctly. I don't know. It's hard to think about that. But are we going to like a 3-3? Is like someone like Jamie being pulled over, not going necessarily to Rox, because we know she's being a little bit disparate in like from Matthew's exits. We know she's not necessarily with Lauren and Brandon. Is Lauren then just getting targeted? I don't know, but I know
I
it would
think
have
it's
been a more
Lauren.
interesting vote.
I think the
Yeah.
vote steal works, and I think it goes on Lauren.
Yeah. So I mean,
it's either Lauren or Matt. Still, I would imagine.
It should have worked now, though. To be fair, it should have.
But
I guess at that point, like Jam and Carson are having to actually make a choice in the swing vote position of like, do we want to go with Soka, but that's maybe a harder spot, maybe a 3-3, then we have to get over Jamie, like tough, or are we forced to go with Ratu and just vote out Matt because we can't go to a 3-3? And also, wait, no, Lauren also has an extra vote, so she's definitely using an extra vote there. So then it's still Matt.
But even if she does, right, it's Carson, Jam, Matt, and then extra steal vote on to Lauren. That's 4 versus extra vote from Lauren, Brandon, Jamie's 3.
Okay, we'll take the extra vote out of it because we're saying it will work, but it should have worked now. So let's say Heidi screws up and doesn't affect the outcome again. Let's just, on actual numbers and the dynamics of strategizing at camp, I think Lauren's extra vote actually hadn't considered that because so many advantages, so many things all the time. But I think that wins out, and Carson and Jam just have to be like, the same. I think Carson probably just adds on to Jam there, but Carson's being more like, I'm with you because he has to be. They'd vote out Matt. And maybe Heidi affects that, hopefully, but she should have done it now. So there's every chance that Matt thinks he's been screwed over by not just the situation, but the extra vote. Then Heidi's going to save him, but then she doesn't. It's actually every chance that the same thing happens, and it's not as interesting as I'd hoped.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if Carson and Jam go with Brandon, Lauren, and Jamie against Matt. The question is, if Heidi then uses the steal it vote correctly, which she should have a better idea of how to use it with that setup.
She should know. She should know now. Like,
fair.
She should use it. Like, I don't see how that's that different. I don't trust that she would.
If she uses it correctly, do they switch and vote out Lauren, or do they stick to their guns and vote out Matt? Would be the question. And I don't know enough about their motive.
If she uses it correctly, I think they vote out Lauren because I think that's what they would have done now. Like, it's the same thing. We're just hoping that with like even more information that Heidi can make the right decision, and I don't trust it. I think Matt's gone. If you're telling me that the difference maker is going to be Heidi,
I think it is.
Matt's out. Then Matt's out. Like I don't like enough has been proven that it would have been the same thing. So the extra vote would have come into play. It would have been Carson, the power of the extra vote, and then Heidi. Are you there, Heidi? Are you helping? Like, and then it's lost again. That's what I.
You know what? You're right, because the way they presented it, tribal would probably be Brandon, Lauren, and Jamie are in control because Lauren has an extra vote. So the question was, do they vote out Jam or Carson, or do they vote out Matt? And it was between the two of those options, and so she probably thinks, okay, well, vote out Jam then, and then it's over.
Best not to try and logic that out for what she might have thought or what she was thinking. It was hard. It was hard to watch. I put up the meme where it's like the person like crying for help, and then like Heidi, and then like the high five, and then the person drowns. And I like laughed for 5 minutes when I made that because it was like the perfect scenario.
It is. That's good.
Last question. Molly asks, what will it take for production to take on these valid concerns about the erosion of the format? Do former Survivor players need to speak out? Do CBS and executives need to intervene? And I was thinking about this, and I have a plan. I've done it. I've solved it. So I don't think it's past contestants like Adam Klein, who I love, whose takes are great. That's not going to help. Boston Rob, maybe. There's a select group that Jeff will listen to, and it's like Tyler Perry. We didn't even know if Tyler Perry has great ideas. Like
Mike
Tyler
White.
Perry and Mike White. Like Mike White has good ideas. Tyler Perry, it's like he did the God Idol, but Tyler Perry is interesting because he gave them an idea they'd already done, and they were like, "That's interesting and new." Like Tyler Perry could be like, "I have an idea. 2 tribes and 1 tribe swap, and they're like, that's brilliant. Never considered. So I think there's something there. But Mike White is our best option. This all depends on Mike White. He has a good sense of the show, and Jeff cares about his opinion. So Mike White and Jennifer Coolidge are coming to Sydney, where I live, for a presentation in conversation with Benjamin Law, who's an author and speaker and, someone in the media who's, high up in the media, who was on Survivor, who I know now. Now, I wouldn't say we're friendly, but I would say maybe fond professional acquaintances. So 2 options. 1, I tell Benjamin Law, can you tell Mike White for me? Mike White, please help. US Survivor is bad now. Please tell Jeff to make it stop. Second option, I buy a ticket to the show. I write a sign in big letters. I hold it up. It says, Mike White, please help. US Survivor is bad now. Please tell Jeff to make it stop.
I like option number 1 better.
But with a big sign, really big.
I think the sign obviously could work. We know that signs usually convince people to do things and change their minds. But maybe with Mike White in particular, I don't know. I'm not sure.
He's just so busy. I think that's what it is. The White Lotus, as much as everyone's enjoying it, is killing Survivor because Mike White doesn't have the time to deal with that. He's making his other show. So if he could just get a few moments to maybe even just watch it and maybe just have 1 phone call with Jeff where he could explain it's bad, I think Jeff would be like, I never thought about it like that. I think Mike White is the key. I know it sounds like I'm being facetious, but that actually is all I have.
No, that's a much better strategy than I would have come up with, which was I think we just have to wait until Jeff gets bored.
He is bored all the time.
I just mean bored with this particular idea of.
You don't want to see what comes next. You don't want to see where that goes.
That's the thing. We've seen them go into tunnels of terrible ideas before, and they come out the other side. Usually, they reset and then they start trying new things again, and it's bad. So I think we just have to wait until he gets bored of doing this stuff, and then hopefully we get a nice little reset. But I think Mike White is a better option. I think I agree. Mike White's giving Survivor time at the Emmys. He's got some clout.
That's why I think if he was doing that, that talk, and he were to see a sign, I think that it would appeal to him. And I'm gonna have to buy a ticket to the show.
What we need, hold on, because here's the thing: Mike White probably won't care. But what Mike White would care about,
he will care,
is if we finally get a returnee season, and one of his friends is on the returnee season and gets screwed over by one of these dumb things. That would make Mike White have a personal investment in these twists suck. Jeff, what's going on?
I think Mike White, he cares about the show. He's the one who told him don't do Redemption Island, right? I think he cares about the show, whether his friends are getting screwed over or not. I just think he's too busy. I really think the White Lotus is killing Survivor. I think that's the thing.
Well, that's what I'm saying. But if let's say, who would be Mike White's go-to?
As a player?
As a go-to
Christian or?
Maybe because Christian hasn't been in the White Lotus.
I thought you meant who's we're gonna get screwed over in the returnee.
Oh, so I mean, Christians could certainly get screwed over in a returnee season. But throw in one of Mike's best Survivor friends, and even though he's busy with White Lotus, now he will be forced to pay attention and care about the fate of Survivor.
It all rests on Angelina, like always.
There we go.
It always was, and that was always the solution. I'm not trying to be funny. Jeff won't listen to most people or any fans or anything other than his basically brain trust, which is
it is funny, but you are completely right. Yeah,
I completely agree. I literally was thinking about this when I couldn't sleep last night. I was like, I'll go to the event. I'll hold up a sign. I'll get Benjamin Law involved. Benjamin Law will block me. Benjamin Law, please help. Tell Mike White.
You gotta slide into it. You gotta just be like, hey, what's up? Hey, we want to just catch up. Have you been checking out Survivor lately?
Yeah. A couple weeks ago. I should have. I didn't know he was doing this thing then.
Yeah, and he'd be like, oh yeah, what's going on Survivor? Oh, it's this whole thing. It's this really bad. What do you got going on? Oh, I've got this thing with Mike White. Oh, interesting. Have you talked to Mike White about Survivor? I wonder if you should,
I think third plan. I go to the event. I make sure I get a front row seat. In the middle of it, I run on stage. I tackle Mike White. Mike White, please help us. As security are dragging me off, please. The show has been my life. Mike White, just talk to Jeff. And then I don't know what happens next. I haven't thought that through.
Okay.
We solved it. We
how about
Survivor. Thank God we do these specials.
could you hand off like a note to Mike White? Like, is there like a meet and greet at all? Like, could
I
you
have
get
to
like
see if
something
the VIP
signed?
ticket. Are we like crowdsourcing the expense of
We
these
can
tickets, or it's all
crowdsource
on
the
my
expense of the
dime?
ticket.
I'll just pay to save Survivor. Like that's all. Yeah,
We'll do a GoFundMe,
we'll get to
and
see the
then
event though.
you'll
Don't
be
you
like,
worry.
Mike White, I just want to shake your hand, sir. You're an inspiration. You
Do like
shake
the
his hand,
money
but in
thing.
your hand is a note, maybe with some money. You know, maybe the extra from the
I think he needs
GoFundMe.
some money. Yeah.
And on the note it says, Mike White, you're our only hope.
Yeah, literally. Or counterpoint, Christian is literally Rob's recap guest right now. I'm about to listen to it after this. Rob just tells him, like, obviously Christian's aware, like, can you just get Mike White to fix it? Like, please.
Maybe Christian can build a robot Mike White that can pass off as human because it uses ChatGPT to communicate, and then robot Mike White speaking with ChatGPT texts Jeff,
Yeah.
hey, gotta fix Survivor.
No, that makes no sense because how does robot Mike White even have Jeff's number?
Look, that's the power of AI.
No, that's not right. I think I'm going to tackle Mike White, but don't play this in a trial one day if I do. Like,
This is inadmissible.
Yeah.
Everyone knows that when you say
I
this
know.
is inadmissible in court, that's binding.
You shouldn't talk about your future crimes on podcasts, right? That's in the rule book. I think Rob said not to do that on the network.
But what I'm saying is that if you say it's inadmissible, then they can't even use it against you. So if anything, you should
Really?
admit to all possible future crimes, and you'll have immunity.
Is that okay?
Pretty sure that's how it works.
Yeah.
Pretty sure.
All right. Well, what a great special, Taran. I feel better. See, this is the thing. This is the only way to engage with the show. You have fun, ranty conversations about how the show is not good, and I find that so fun. I really had the best time.
Yeah, well, I did as well. A good 3 hour. What should we call this? It was like I had a good word for it like 2.5 hours ago, but at this point my brain is rattled.
Like what? Like the
like
crossover
it's a
spectacular.
very serious sit down intervention kind of conversation about Survivor,
Intervention.
referendum. That's the general
Yeah,
family that I'm looking
like a
for,
town
but I haven't
meeting.
found it yet. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I hope that the listeners out there found it as cathartic as I did. I'm sorry that I'm a little sick as well. If that's, I'm just like really hopped up on rage and like cold medication. So I think that's like that's what it is. And I feel better about it. Like I'm so glad that I get to podcast about the show, because when it's great, that's really fun. Just had that with Australian Survivor. Again, encourage everyone to watch Australian Survivor and Survivor South Africa. If you're missing what the show used to be, there's versions of it in different ways, otherwise happening. But also, then when it's bad, I'm like, I can't wait to rant about that. And then this is such a fun conversation. So should we do this next week? So every week we'll do this?
Yeah, every week and 6 months.
Yeah.
So next week plus 6 months ish. That's roughly when
and
the
that's
next
what makes
season's on,
it.
right?
That's what makes it special. So
Exactly.
that's some good producing right there. Taran, as my guest, and I'm your guest, tell the listeners where they can find your stuff. The usual global listeners, what they should be checking out from you and where.
Well, if you find yourself watching the episode on your own, being frustrated, or maybe excited, then and you want to experience it with other people, I stream on Twitch, twitch.tv/Taran Armstrong, during the episode. So you can come and join a whole crowd of people, chat along as the episode goes. We run little predictions about what we think is going to happen in the episode, and it's a good time, a nice little communal experience. So you can come and join me on Twitch doing that, and then I do some other stuff on Twitch as well, play some games, hang out. We got Big Brother podcasts. We got I've got Among Us videos that I've dropped on YouTube. About to start dropping some Goose Duck videos, which is like Among Us but with geese and cooler. And that's pretty much it.
Great. Well, everyone check that out. I have Australian Survivor stuff, deep dive, so many deep dives. I won't give the names because if you're gonna watch it, I don't want to even like say who for the Stockwatch listeners, like who deserved a deep dive or did a deep dive. I actually asked a lot of people, and some people are like, this was a lot. But so check that out. Survivor Global. Obviously, next week my guest will be Teresa from Survivor South Africa. Follow me at Shannon Gates and subscribe to the International Survivor RHAP feed for all of my content. Reality TV RHAP is where you can get both the Stockwatch and Global when they're not, together once per season. So check that out. And now we have to do the sign off, Taran. How do we do this again between the two of us?
I think we do this.
I can be a badass.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for listening. Thank you. Bye.